Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. I'm here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. We're broadcasting live, online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, Rocket City Trash Pandas' pay is gonna double thanks to the union. Madison City Council updates. Labor is winning in Michigan. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a packed show, so I don't think we're going to be opening up the phone lines, but you can give us a text at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also send us a voicemail throughout the week or a text message throughout the week, and we might respond or play your voicemail on the air on the next show. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us online, particularly at our website, TVLR.FM, where we are coming out with new stuff every single day. TVLR.FM. You're going to want to make sure to bookmark that. Also, sign up to our daily newsletter. Monday through Thursday, we send out a newsletter with all of the new Valley Labor Report content, as well as, links to our merch. I'm thinking about adding a What We're Reading section so that y'all can see what we're checking out throughout the week as well, and maybe lift up some other projects. So you can do that. Sign up for our newsletter at tvlr.fm/contact. In the message box, just tell us, hey, I want to be on the daily newsletter, or if you only want it once per week, tell us you want to be on the weekly newsletter. We can accommodate both of those things. You can also find us, obviously, on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. We're going to be creating an Instagram account here soon, but we haven't yet, but we're going to get to that. So anywhere you find anything online, we're there. The Valley Labor Report. Just search for us. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor, then or make a one-time donation, you can go to our website, tvlr.fm/donate. You can also become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. You can buy our merch. We ordered about 20 of the Good Things State tees to have as a in stock. You know, we can't, unfortunately, even though I think that they're really cool, and I think that once they come out, more people is going to want them. We can't afford to, just have a whole bunch of stuff just in my closet, right? Because, for one, it costs money, and then also I don't have the office space because I have a small apartment. So, so we've got 20 of those in stock. You can buy that at our website, tvlr.fm/store. If you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show as well. You can reach out to me for more details on that. We could not do the show without our union sponsors.
Absolutely. Thank you to all of those and to all of those who are sure to come. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program today belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you are on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check it out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who believe that Alabama and the South's labor movement and working class deserve a bigger platform. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we could not do it without you. We want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you are a loyal fan here, again, as always, or you're a first-time listener. We really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is April 1st. Despite that, we have no hijinks or gimmicks planned for today. It really snuck up on us. Really snuck up on us because I had in my head maybe, and maybe we can do this for like Halloween or April Fool's Day next year. But I think it would be very funny to do like a mock financial management thing, like the show that comes on before us in the radio. We could just do a mock thing like that, or like a right-wing radio kind of thing. But I think because we're bosses, or I think because we're unionists, right, it would be more funny. It would be funny to do like a mock right-wing radio thing, but it would be more kind of on brand to do one of those like business type things, right?
Oh yeah,
hustle and grind. Adam, you're always getting these like business newsletters for some reason. I think you read those like I read, like I listen to right wing radio.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Got to do a little opposition research sometimes.
Yeah, so I think that would be fun. Let's make a mental note of that.
All right, that sounds like a plan. I know originally we planned to have some politicians on for the April 1st episode, which would have been on brand for the day. Certainly would have been foolish. But instead, we're talking the good news of unions today.
That's right. That's right. Speaking of good news, folks, Rocket City Trash Pandas players will be making more than double during this baseball season. That's right. Their pay is going to double. Rocket City Trash Pandas players' pay will double this season. That is if they ratify the collective bargaining agreement negotiated by their union that they just won in September. The agreement is for 5 years. It's a tentative agreement. It is now off to the membership for a membership ratification vote with the 5,000 minor league baseball players who are now members of the union. The biggest thing is really the wages. The biggest thing is really the wages in this agreement. And across all levels of the minor leagues, pay is going to be more than doubling. So let's take a look at this. From in the complex league, which that's rookie ball. I don't know what it is. I don't know exactly what that means. But the complex league, their pay is going to go from $4,800 a year, which is wild. Think about that, to $19,800 a year. Still not a whole lot, but you're getting a lot closer to, this job is something that is kind of sustainable. At the rookie league, you're still, it's kind of, I think, expected that you're going to be working a second job. But it's, from 5,000 to 20,000, a quadrupling in that case. That's huge, right?
Absolutely.
In the low A's, pay is going from $11,000 to $26,200 a year. In the high A's, it's going to be going from $11,000 to $27,300 a year, which is, again, not enough, I don't think, and that's my issue with having a 5-year agreement is, this is their first contract, so obviously, hopefully, the next one's going to be better. I just hate they're going to have to wait for 5 years to get to the next one. The double A's, which is what Rocket City Trash Pandas is. Rocket City Trash Pandas is the double-A minor league affiliate, is a double-A minor league affiliate of the Angels. Their pay is going to be going from $13,800 a year to $30,250 a year. This is some $30,000 a year is you're getting pretty close to, this is a reasonable pay, I think. I think I would be, the USFL, basically the minor league football, one of the minor spring football leagues, their pay is $55,000 in their newly negotiated union contract. So I think something like that really should be the goal. But still, a big improvement. And then finally in the AAAs, it's going from $17,500 a year to $35,800 a year. So like I said, the pay is really the biggest thing, and that's, the biggest thing that the baseball players were telling folks, when they would be asked about, why are you unionizing? That's why. And so that's a pretty big difference. Major League Baseball also agreed during the contract not to reduce minor league affiliates from the current 120.
That's very significant.
Yes, that is very significant. Now, there are going to be, so that's the minor league affiliates. There's going to be no less teams over the course of this contract. There are going to be very few more players, in that the max that they could have now I think is 190, and the max under this contract is going to be 180. So there will potentially be some like a couple here and there folks that positions on the teams that aren't going to be available, but I think overall it's a good thing. Also, most players will be guaranteed housing, and players at AA and AAA will be given a single room as opposed to having to bunk together. Players at low A and high A will have the option of exchanging club housing for a stipend. The domestic violence and drug policies will be covered by the union agreement as well, and players who sign for the first time at 19 or older can become minor league free agents after 6 seasons instead of 7. Minor league players will also receive 4 weeks of retroactive spring training pay for this year. They'll get $625 weekly for spring training and off-season training camp, and $250 weekly for off-season workouts at home. So, like I said, it's a huge difference from what they were working with before. And I'm really excited about this. I think that it's going to make the minor leagues a lot more sustainable. I'm obviously, being in Huntsville, a fan of the Trash Pandas. I go to games fairly regularly. And I'm excited to know that, they're going to be making significantly more than they made last year. So,
and it's always good as union folks to be able to support other union folks, right? And now, as I mentioned with the XFL and USFL, how cool it is to cheer on those brothers out there knowing they have a union contract. And it's the same here with the Rocket City Trash Pandas, the Birmingham Barons, and the rest of the minor league teams. So definitely good news to hear this morning.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering what they faced, right? They were legally exempted from minimum wage laws by a law passed in 2018 under Trump. And many of them, like I just said, made less than $12,000 a year. And when you're doing a professional sport, even if it's in the minor leagues, that requires really kind of a full-time level dedication to practicing, training, working out, all of this type of stuff. And so the time that you can spend doing a second job is really limited. And they provide a lot of entertainment for folks. And, if this is a thing that we are going to be willing as consumers to spend money on, then the people who put it on for us really should be compensated well. Especially when you consider the owners, millionaires and billionaires, for literally just owning, right? The quintessential, the archetypal business owner, who works hard and kind of comes from the bottom up and has this small business and works longer than his employees. That's not the case with sports leagues, right? They're literally just owners for owning, whereas all these people are doing lots of work. It's pretty insane, the system. They really, preyed on people's dreams. And Adam, you remembered working in a restaurant and talking to, some of the Stars players back in the day, right?
Oh, yeah.
About stuff that they faced.
Yeah, I worked for a little while at one of the restaurants that was at the Joe Davis Stadium back when we had the Huntsville Stars. And, I got a chance to talk to some of the players. And if I remember right, they were staying 4 to an apartment. And these were not like big, luxurious apartments either.
Right.
They were pretty much, one of the cheapest complexes in South Huntsville, fairly close to the stadium. So, they were struggling. They were struggling. It was very obvious. They were living, like kids, basically, having to, help each other out, living off ramen noodles and staying 4 to an apartment. So, to hear that there's improvement on housing, there's improvement with pay, I think that's significant because, like you said, they prey on folks' dreams. So many young folks have a dream to play professional sports, and we know the reality is most will not make it.
Right.
But that opportunity is kind of dangled out for so many, young men and women out there in the sporting leagues. It's dangled and, it's taken advantage of. And so I think through collective organization, these workers, like any other worker, can have a better existence and a better salary and better working conditions for themselves and for their families.
Absolutely. Yeah, really excited about that. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next story, though. We have our regular Madison City Council update segment. Tryston Gilbert is on the line, right, Adam?
That's right.
Tryston Gilbert is on the line. He is our resident Madison City Council watcher. Tryston, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report.
Good morning, gentlemen. I've got a lot to talk about today, so feel free to help me stay on track.
Yeah, good morning. Let's just jump into it.
All right, so you watch enough of these meetings, you start to notice some trends. So I'm mainly going to talk about three things today. There's a handful of political action groups in Madison to know about, to be aware of. There's a couple of locally relevant conspiracy theories. That's going to be either fun or horrible, depending on your mood. And then we'll talk a little bit about transparency and the decline and, I guess, resurgence of local news and whose job it is to get information out to the public.
Absolutely.
Before I get into it, I'll go ahead and knock out some headlines. Madison has set a date for the special election concerning what the form of government is going to be in the future. So that's going to be the vote between the council manager form of government and the current council mayor form of government. That's going to be Tuesday, May 9th, between 7 a.m., 7 p.m. at your usual polling places. So if you live in Madison, write it down, Tuesday, May 9th. There's going to be an Easter egg hunt on the 8th, if that's your thing. There's more information on the city website for that. And there are still some job postings available for the Police Citizens Advisory Board. That's the citizens board that has a say in how the police department does their thing. So if you have concerns about the way police are, which you probably do if you're paying any attention these days, districts 2, 4, and 6 are open for applications until April 12th.
Okay, thank you for that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any comments before I move into the meat?
I just encourage people to take advantage of that committee and put their application in 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so to start off with, there are 3 political action groups in Madison that show up and are represented at the council meetings. The first one is Vote Madison. They are a voter information and civic engagement focused group. They're the ones who are responsible for uploading a lot of the council streams to YouTube. So any clips that we show later, you can thank them for. They take a pretty neutral stance on vote on the various issues. They just want to get as many people engaged and information out as possible. That doesn't mean they're without enemies, as we'll see in the conspiracy theory section. Their stated values are promoting transparency and accessibility, filling resource gaps, fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion. Keep that one in mind for later. Transcending partisan polarization and encouraging dialogue free of divisive language. So pretty agreeable stuff there, right?
I would
think.
Yeah.
Our second group of note, who we've talked about before, is Madison Forward. They were the ones who went and got the petition signatures for holding this vote to transition the government. They took that to the probate judge, and he's the one who issued the order to the city to hold the special election. They came out of a committee that the mayor designated in 2021 to address the city's growth and what the government could do to sort of handle that as it continued, because the city has grown just a huge amount in the last several years. Their website has some of that information. I lost the link for that at the moment, but it's something like over 100%. The city's just ballooned upward.
Wow.
And the judges that they talked to and got to order this election are Judge Barger and Judge Woodruff. I don't know anything about them. If that means anything to anybody else, That's great.
Barger is just some
Barger.
lore for everybody. He is the guy who back in 2018 or something, he allowed a lawsuit to go forward of this guy who was suing a former partner for her getting an abortion. And he allowed that to go through despite being a probate judge because he said that fetuses are humans.
Well,
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing, I guess. The third group I want to talk about is a little bit newer. They call themselves Don't Mess with Madison. They formed in January specifically to oppose the potential transition to the council manager form of government. I read one of their blogs where they were arguing that that losing the mayor's position would lose the equivalent of 4 votes in veto power. And I think there's an interesting discussion about that. It's the way they phrased it in their blog was that like we are losing the equivalent of 4 votes of veto power. I want to know who we is in that statement, and whether or not anybody thinks that if the veto is equivalent to 4 votes, does that make it more or less democratic? Does it balance power, or does it put a lot more power into one person's hands?
Right.
And despite being a grassroots supposedly organization, they tried to convince the council not to set a date to hold the special election. They seem to not trust their fellow city folks, citizens very well. And I believe they recently filed a lawsuit against Terry Johnson of Madison Forward, who we talked about a little bit last time I was here. So I don't have a lot of nice things to say about them. I understand some of their voiced concerns. I do not trust their motivation, because a lot of the conspiracy theories we're about to get into are coming from their side of things. Do you have any questions, comments?
I don't.
Okay, well, I tried to provide some clips for some of the conspiracy theories that we're seeing floating around. I have a little bit of research info about those.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and play this one from Elizabeth?
Yeah, so she is the chief blogger for Don't Mess with Madison. So this should give you an insight into her philosophy.
Okay.
We don't want to own nothing and be happy. We want to own homes and we want to own businesses. And your mission should be to protect these freedoms. You should work hard to protect our rights to own property and to buy and sell and go places. Madison could be a place where its citizens are known for their innovation, where there are creative small businesses. And we don't need central planners to plan that. We need you to protect our freedom to do it ourselves. Sadly, what I see more and more are barriers. We have centralized planning and government-run economic development right here in Madison. You seem to be preferring big developers and big chain businesses. I live right by town Madison, and I'm enjoying all the businesses, but as I looked at Kava, I was looking forward to Kava coming. I looked at their website to see when they're opening, and on it, it says they do unconscious bias training. So for all the big chains that are opening up here, you're actually restricting the opportunities of local people to have their conscience respected. It's promoting woke ideology, which is what the unconscious bias training means. If we have small businesses, we have freedom.
Wow. I did not know central planning had taken root in Madison County, Alabama. Nor did I know that fast food chains were, bastions of woke ideology, whatever that's supposed to mean. But
the woke corporations.
Right. Interesting. So, okay. All right.
So best I can tell, the whole wokeism conspiracy theory is a repackaging of the cultural Marxism that you'll hear people like Jordan Peterson talk about,
Right.
which is itself a repackaging of international Bolshevism, which the Nazis used to kind of help consolidate power for their side. It's a lumping of all sorts of folks into a category of undesirables that keep these it keeps the believers from having to talk about who it is they're really against. They fabricate a straw man and make it seem like they're the ones under fire.
Right. And because the thing is, like, I'm sensitive to local government being, you know, on the take, so to speak, of big businesses and, you know, being overly generous to fast food chains and national franchises. Like, that's, you know, so I hear what you're saying, that there's some voiced concerns from that crowd that may resonate with citizens, but it's wrapped in this bizarre conspiracy ideology.
Yeah, I think the thing to really understand about wokeism is that when people say woke or wokeism without a shred of irony or, you know, just a side eye, you know, we'll talk about what the cynical deployment of quote unquote woke stuff, but there's a lot of irony whenever we use it, and a lot of, you know, not seriousness and trying to lift the veil and unobscure things. When, you know, because we have a critique, you know, she's talked about unconscious bias training, and you know, we have a critique of these management-led quote unquote diversity trainings or whatever, and we've talked about it, and we've talked about it extensively, and a lot of it is really just to, you know, placate people's desire for justice without actually having to do anything. But whenever there's this real unironic use of the word woke or wokeism, and whenever they, you know, sincerely attach that label to something like a McDonald's or a Cahaba's, right? It is kind of indicative of the seriousness with which you should take the rest of their statement, which is not very much.
Yeah, they treat it like it's some very militant thing, when in truth it's an incredibly watered down version for the corporations to make as little progress as possible in almost every case, right?
Right. Exactly.
So she also mentioned DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion, in there. There was another commenter from senior citizen Bob Peters, who comes on to tell us what that really means.
Yeah, let's
if you
play
got that
clip
one
from Bob.
Just wanted to point out that the reason the city manager effort came forward, I believe, was because of a group came, I Vote Madison. They had a concerted effort to bring forward the petitions for the city manager. Now, I Vote Madison claims to be nonpartisan. However, they want to have people on their board who are diversity, equity, and inclusion on the board. Diversity, equity, and inclusion tries to train the world that whites are racist, and this is simply untrue. Anyway, it's a very partisan effort, and while all people have the right to jobs and try out for jobs and work for jobs, it shouldn't be based on non-merit or skin color. Our jobs should be based on the quality of your resume, the quality of how hard you work.
I've never heard diversity, equity, and inclusion used like as a noun. Like their board has some of those.
You're right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you are deeply offended by the concept of diversity, that might be a reflection of something you have going on inside, deep in your heart or in your brain. Just a thought.
And I don't really watch right-wing news sources, so I don't know when this started, but I feel like this is something they've latched onto because it's watered down corporate language that a lot of companies have adopted because it's the least amount of work for them. So you see this acronym DEI popping up in a lot of places, and to them that's a conspiracy. And Bob in that clip, he was a bit confused. It was Madison Forward that created the petition for the city manager. It wasn't I Vote Madison.
Right.
So I don't. I don't know how where he's getting his information. I don't want to cast any aspersions there, but he was also one of the people most vocally against the medical marijuana bill back last fall, and his wife was chiming in with him on that too. She had a longer clip, but I know we're already out of time, or overtime, so I only play that if you want to. But.
Yeah, we weren't. I wasn't able to pull that one, but I did. I did listen to it, and she said, she mentioned her advocacy against marijuana, and she mentioned that the council doesn't know who they're dealing with, and that some of these people are members of the Democrat Socialists of America, and that's a very scary group, she says. So,
yeah. I wonder whose show they go on. It's a mystery.
Yeah, I don't know. Wouldn't know anything about that.
There were one last note of the conspiracy theories. There were a couple people talking about voting machine fraud. One of the frequent commenters loudly demanded a hand count in addition to the automatic count. And of course, the voting machine frauds conspiracy was started by Donald Trump during his bid to overturn the 2020 election. There's an ongoing lawsuit by, what's the company that makes those? Dominion? Dominion, yeah, against that lawyer who was saying all those crazy things. So that's here. It's always wonderful to learn that stuff is local and not just on the news.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So moving on to my last point, there have been a couple people on like both and every side of this issue, including the group that just wants transparency, asking the council to stream more of their meetings, their work sessions, not just the big public every other week council meetings. And the president, Renee Bartlett, she was very frustrated by some of these. If you don't want to play her clips, that's fine. I think I can summarize her argument.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
She said that in the past, when she's been involved in local government for something like 15 years, there were always reporters from like Huntsville Times and other local papers and news stations in the room that were doing that work. And of course, that was before streaming. So they've never had any sort of meeting or anything to set up streaming. Of course, lacking strong external pressure, they're going to do things the way they've always done. So I guess the discussion there is whose job is it to get that information out to the public in a time when local journalism is sort of in decline? And is what we're doing here kind of a reversal of that? Well, what do you guys think?
That's definitely part of what we hope to do, but certainly, the ability that shows like ours would have to replicate, because she talked about in her clip, she was talking about hiring somebody or interviewing somebody and how somebody from the Huntsville Times would be there in the room, taking notes for an article, right? And that's, that's just something that we don't have capacity for, and there are, the Huntsville Times just stopped its print operation. And it is really, really, and then the people that are replacing them, like right-wing radio, right-wing radio is still doing very, very well. The revenue for just one of the conservative stations here is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars monthly, right? But they're not putting that into reporting. They're putting that into commentary and, salaries for the hosts and, just it's just commentary. It's just shock jock stuff. There's no actual, reporting value there, and it's really sad.
Yeah, I think it would be excellent if the local government would set up a consistent streaming service. It would make the job of keyboard amateurs like me taking notes on some of this stuff a bit easier. But lacking that, I guess along with voting for your form of government on May 9th, if anybody out there has time to sit in on some work sessions and take notes, please, every little bit helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important for folks to get engaged in local government because of that lack of local journalism. Because I think that's true, what she's saying, that in the past you would have reporters in these kind of rooms and these kind of meetings, but those reporters aren't there anymore. And the reporters that still exist, by and large, are not even going to those kind of meetings. And if they did go to that kind of meeting, it would probably just be to republish the press release that the government put out themselves. Okay, so there is such a deficit with journalism, particularly at the local level. And at the local level, you can make more influence. If you show up to a school board meeting or a city council meeting or a county commission meeting and you don't normally show up, chances are you'll be noticed, because there won't be that many more people in attendance who aren't required to be there for some reason or another. So there is some power among citizens at the local level if organized and harnessed, appropriately. But I think the work that you're doing is very important, because it's critical that we monitor what's going on, and we know what's going on, not just from the government, but also from our fellow citizens, as you pointed out, how some of these really disturbing trends in right-wing media circulates all the way down, from D.C. and New York and the airwaves to little Madison, Alabama. And you have people showing up to their city council meeting advocating for stuff that is based on nonsense that they heard on TV or saw on Facebook. And so, it's all the more important that regular, everyday people with half a brain do some coordination and some monitoring of what's happening at the local level.
Yep. Tryston, Madison City Council watcher, appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Tryston.
Yeah. All right, folks, we're going to go to a break, and we will be right back. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
The sign hit the city like a bolt of lightning.
You know the photo. It's iconic. Marches in the streets holding a simple sign with a simple message.
I am a man.
The I Am Story podcast explores the fight that inspired those words, how a group of sanitation workers in Memphis stood up and made history.
They don't see us as men and women.
Go to IamStory.com or wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morris, and my co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can send us a text message. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Appreciate folks that are hanging out with us in the chat on YouTube. Thank you, Strom McCallum, for the $2 super chat. Yeah. And he says he was in Alabama yesterday, had some good and bizarrely named restaurants. So that's good. Glad to hear you enjoyed the cooking while you were here. And appreciate the rest of the conversation happening down there. Also appreciate folks watching on YouTube, on Facebook. Presumably we've got Mel and Joe hanging out with us there. So, Adam, we've got some news coming out of Atlanta from your union, right?
That's right. Yeah, my sisters in Atlanta, my IATSE sisters in Atlanta at the Opera House there, have actually been locked in a pretty bitter struggle. And I wanted to share it with you folks this morning, to kind of lift up this struggle and share what's happening there. So the Atlanta Opera continues to block their hair and makeup crews access to health care and retaliate against them by slashing wages, all because they sought the dignity and respect of a union. In the summer of 2021, the 100% black hair and makeup crew at the Atlanta Opera voted to join IATSE Local 798. The hope of the workers was that once a majority voted to form a union, they could collectively bargain a contract providing the employees with health insurance and retirement benefits, similar to what the musicians, stagehands, and costume and wardrobe workers who work under a union contract already have. But what the Atlanta Opera did is callous. In a cynical attempt to deny hair and makeup artists the benefits of a union, the Atlanta Opera tried to prevent workers from voting by arguing that they are independent contractors rather than employees, and that they don't have the right to unionize or to seek better terms for their employment. However, thankfully, the Atlanta Opera has lost that argument. The election was then held, but before the votes could be counted, the Atlanta Opera appealed to the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, in Washington, D.C., to try once again to claim that the workers were not employees. By doing so, Atlanta Opera management caused ballots cast by the crew to be impounded while the NLRB considers if these workers are even employees once again. To make matters worse, the Atlanta Opera retaliated against the crew by degrading their pay and conditions, effectively denying them work at future performances, despite the fact that the venue received over $1.6 million in taxpayer funds through federal PPP loans. Atlanta opera hair and makeup artists need your support. Join them in telling management to respect their workers by giving them equitable treatment and counting their votes. I'll drop a link to the petition in the chat. But just this past week or so, on March 21st, we had a press release from the International, from IATSE, where there was an announcement that the NLRB had actually unsealed and counted the ballots. They had been impounded for nearly 2 years, but on Tuesday, the 21st, they were counted, and the results revealed that the Atlanta opera hair and makeup artists unanimously supported joining together under IATSE Local 798. According to President Matthew D. Loeb, the international president of IATSE, he said, quote, "Today's count reaffirms what we already knew. The workers have spoken in a free and fair election, and they want a union. The Atlanta Opera's retaliatory behavior and continued legal games up to this point are an affront to democracy and to the values their institution supposedly embodies. Every worker in entertainment who wants a union deserves one. We are not leaving anyone behind the scenes behind." The unit of hair and makeup workers who requested union representation, like I said, is fully comprised of black artists. And these union busting tactics from the Atlanta Opera are being taken to prevent these workers from exercising their rights. A March 2022 Actors Equity Statement explains, quote, "What is far more shameful is that the Atlanta Opera has denied a group of all black artists their right to organize. These employers have not only refused to acknowledge the bargaining unit's legitimacy, but retaliated against them. Such actions contradict the work of Atlanta Opera's own EDI task force, which vows to counteract bias, increase diversity, and foster an inclusive climate." All right, I'm going to pause right here because I think that's interesting that we were just mentioning DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, in the context of Madison, Alabama. And as we mentioned, many corporations and institutions have adopted these sorts of policies, primarily, administered through their human resources department. It's something they can check off a list. They can throw this out there every time they get an EEOC complaint. And here's the Atlanta Opera. They have their own task force supposed to counteract bias, increase diversity, and foster an inclusive climate. Well, how the hell is union busting against a bunch of black women increase diversity or foster an inclusive climate? Would love to know the answer to that from Atlanta Opera's management. In spring 2021, employees who performed the art of hairstyling and makeup at the Atlanta Opera sought the opportunity to vote, and they secured an election through the NLRB. But it was this continued legal maneuvering from the opera that has dragged this out for over 2 years now, right? They're trying the misclassification argument, and that's something that has been used against workers all over this country, where there are workers who should be considered employees but are misclassified as independent contractors. And that is a tried and true method to exploit folks and to deny folks their rights. So, despite the fact that the ballots were counted, it is not over yet. While the unsealing and counting of ballots is a significant step forward, these hair and makeup artists now await a final decision from the NLRB regarding their eligibility for unionization in the first place. So, despite the unanimous support, it's still up in the air as to whether or not these folks will get the union that they deserve. There is a petition, as I mentioned. I'll drop a link to that in the chat for you to share and to sign. I did get just yesterday a brief update that the opera has now decided to negotiate. No word yet on what that's going to look like or, where things stand with that, but I did get an update from one of the sisters out there that it looked like the opera now was willing to meet with them. So, fingers crossed that things are about to work out there, but just real shameful behavior from the Atlanta Opera. And I want to send our love and solidarity to these sisters out there doing very important work, and they deserve a union. They deserve health care. They deserve a living wage. It's not unreasonable and especially in a institution that proclaims itself to be working on diversity and equity and inclusion.
Right.
Come on now. That is the sort of hollowness behind so many of these policies that makes it all the more laughable that, we're supposed to believe it's some sort of vast conspiracy.
Right.
No, it's just human resources.
Exactly.
So sending our love to the sisters at the Atlanta Opera. I did reach out to an organizer in the area, and I'm working on trying to get an interview set up with a couple of these folks. I think it would be great to hear their story, and definitely wishing them all the best, and hope they get that union, and hope they get that contract that they deserve.
Absolutely. Have we got Joey Andrews in the Zoom yet?
Let me check here. I do believe we have Joey in the Zoom. Yes.
All right, great. Well, we'll go ahead and bring him on. Joey Andrews is the Democratic state representative for Michigan's 38th district. He is also a former policy analyst for the Michigan AFL. Joey, thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, before, obviously, I think people can kind of guess the reason that we wanted to talk to you is that there have been some huge wins for labor in Michigan. You recently repealed right to work, quote unquote, and you reinstituted prevailing wage. But, before we get to that, can you speak a little bit to your own background and why you have seen unions as being so important? It's not something that being a lawyer, right? Not too many lawyers are going to go work for the AFL, and it's certainly not where you're going to make the big bucks, right? So, there's obviously some sort of belief there in the power of unions. Just talk to us about that.
Yeah, so a lot of it is family. The major one is my grandfather on my mom's side. So my grandparents were immigrants that came over from Germany at the end of World War II. And after my grandfather got here, he joined the Carpenters Union in Michigan, worked as a union carpenter for 30, 40 years almost, I think. It allowed my grandmother, who spoke kind of broken English at best, to be a stay-at-home mom, raise 4 kids, bought a house that he improved himself as a carpenter. And then there was a tragedy that happened in the mid-'80s, a little before I was born. He, as a result of an on-the-job accident that he had a few years prior, he had a brain aneurysm, died suddenly. Leaving my grandmother, who hadn't really, aside from some, side work as a seamstress, had never worked a day in her life, with, a house that was virtually an empty nest at this point. And his union benefits helped her keep her house and continue to live the life that she had enjoyed. And without his union, I think there's every probability that she would have struggled to keep the house, that it would have completely disrupted our entire family. And so, for me, that has been kind of fundamental in how I view the labor movement and, what labor does for working people.
Talk to us about your work as a policy analyst for the AFL. What is that? What did you do specifically?
Yeah, so I started my time at the AFL as an organizer before getting into the policy department. Okay. Fun fact, in the 2020 cycle, I was working for the Michigan Democratic Party, and myself and a couple other organizers unionized the coordinated campaign in the state. And that experience is really what drove me to work for labor, because I got to see firsthand that the party doesn't always live its values. The minute we announced our card signing campaign, they just went into like full-blown union busting mode.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, rats in the ranks, and then they made contract negotiations take 2 months. We were almost to October before we even had a contract. And then all the things, classic thing, right? All the things they told us they couldn't afford in the contract, at the end of the campaign, they just gave us. They couldn't put healthcare through the end of the year in the contract, too much money. But then once the campaign was over, they're like, yeah, you guys can have another month of healthcare. But it's not in the contract.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, so I went to work at the AFL after that, did some organizing work for them before moving to the policy side. And a lot of what I did there was look at under what, the time was our right to work framework and some other really unfriendly labor laws that we had, ways that we could empower local municipalities and, try to level the field as best we could with so many of these unfair laws on the books. So I got to spend a lot of time with all of these, little attacks on labor that the Republicans had passed for decades.
And, you were ended up being successful during this legislative session. And so let's talk about those two in particular, and then we can go to any other wins that may have been as not as heavily reported on, but I know that those are two really important ones. And that's first is the repeal of right to work. And this, talk to us about right to work. How do you see people's reaction to when they hear right to work and their conception of it?
Yeah, I mean, right to work has got to be one of the best messaging campaigns that the right has ever come up with. As you guys are well aware, right to work has nothing to do with rights or working. It has everything to do with preventing collective bargaining from happening effectively. We always used to nickname it right to freeload, which I think is more descriptive of what it actually does. And I think that's a messaging battle we've had to fight. But I have personally found a lot of success that once you explain to somebody that all right to work does is enable people to benefit from the collective bargaining of the union and the benefits that it's achieving without having to pay for it, I think it really triggers a lot of people's fundamental fairness feelings at that point. I mean, I've talked to a lot of Republicans who are at a baseline anti-union, but you explain to them what right to work does, and their reaction is immediately, well, that's not fair. Yeah.
And I think that for me, there's obviously that fairness bit of it, but for me, one of the most hypocritical things about the right to work and the crown that it's coming from is that, this is supposedly, ostensibly, a, small government type of folks that this right to work legislation typically comes from. And they're the type of people that are always going to be the ones opposing any safety regulations, any at all, limitations on the contractual authority of the employers. And what right to work actually does mechanically is it goes in between the union, the workers, and the employer and say, this is a contract provision by law that you can't agree to, right? Because in collective bargaining states, nobody from the government is saying you have to agree to a security clause, you have to agree to a, fair pay, fair representation clause. Nobody says that from the state. That's something that the workers and the employer agree to voluntarily, right? But but in right to work states, the government comes in and says, no, you can't do that. That's against the law. It's really bizarre.
We have several other laws like that on the books, and it's all the same sort of thing. The party of small and local government until it's a local government's ability to set wages, until it's a local government's ability to set a prevailing wage, until it's the local government's ability to require paid family leave. It's a very hypocritical stance to take, I think, for just given what ostensibly they're saying their ideology is.
We've had exactly the same thing happen in Alabama. We had a Raise the Wage campaign that was going successfully in Huntsville, particularly picking up steam after Birmingham passed a higher minimum wage than the states. And then the legislature came in and shot it down and said, nope, that's illegal. You can't govern what happens in your city limits. Really terrible stuff. But you mentioned prevailing wage and during that, and so let's talk about that. We actually had on somebody from the Illinois Economic Policy Institute talk about a few months ago, talk about the effects of prevailing wage repeals over the last 5 years or so. And, as you can imagine, it wasn't exactly as the defenders of the repeals described. And so talk to us about prevailing wage, what it means, and what it means now that it's going to be reinstated in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, so essentially prevailing wage is a rule that requires any projects that use state dollars or federal dollars in the case of federal prevailing wage to pay a standard wage to anybody working on the project. Effectively, it levels the playing field for both union and non-union contractors because it takes wage setting out of the bidding process. And as you noted,
hold on, Joey. Now, anti-union people tell me that prevailing wage means non-union contractors can't even apply for these bids. That's what I hear.
It does in practice mean a lot of them don't apply for the bids because most of them can't make a profit unless they're paying their workers, substandard wages. But
the government's not coming in and telling them, oh, you can't bid for this contract if you're not a union contractor?
Nope, that's not in there.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
And interesting. I believe there was a state senator, a Republican from Indiana, that commented that the repeal of the prevailing wage law had, in fact, in practice, not done anything to improve costs of bids, and said that his words that it was a mistake. And I think that's generally what you see in the data everywhere, that without prevailing wage, the job costs don't go down. All that happens is workers get paid less and the contractor gets paid more. They just shift around where the profit and where the money lands in the bid. But when you bring on low-paid workers who aren't professionals in their field, you end up with a lower quality of work, which over time actually increases the amount of money that the state is spending on these projects. Right. The data is pretty clear. Prevailing wage states, projects actually end up saving money over non-prevailing wage states.
Well, and we saw the exact same thing come out of West Virginia from Governor Jim Justice. He said that, we repealed prevailing wage, we, implemented right to work, and the businesses told us they'd come, and then they never did. And now he hasn't reinstituted prevailing wage, right? But, there is a recognition of the fact that prevailing wage doesn't, it's not like a wasteful thing. It's something that's actually, in fact, obviously good for construction workers, but it's good for the city as well and the community.
And fun fact, the federal prevailing wage, the Davis-Bacon Act, was a Republican-led initiative because exactly. And the reason, go figure, was they were a couple of New England Congress people, and what was happening is Southern laborers were coming up into the Northeast, and the contractors were paying them nothing. And they were taking all the work from local contractors because they were underpaying their workers. And so they said, hey, this is an unfair practice. We don't mind you guys coming up and bidding on work, but you got to pay your people appropriately if you're going to do it. And so, I mean, that's the origin of prevailing wage. So if, it kind of strikes you that at one point Republicans found that kind of fairness important.
Right. That is really fascinating. So it's really cool to see this kind of stuff happening in Michigan, and look longingly at those achievements, as here in Alabama, prevailing wage is gone. Obviously, it's been gone. I think it was Republicans that removed it, but and we're a right to work state. Union density is pretty low, and obviously, the animus and real bigotry towards unions and unionism is just apparent in this state. So it's nice to see some people seeing some success legislatively.
Yeah, it's been 10 years coming, and right to work was always an odd fit for Michigan. I mean, the birthplace of the UAW and the labor movement in general. Michigan's always been a labor state, and when they did right to work, at the 11th hour lame duck session in 2012, the public outcry and the protests were enormous. And I mean, they barred the Capitol; they weren't letting protesters in. Just all kinds of dirty tactics because they knew that what they were doing was unpopular, and so this has been a long time coming, and the response from the public has been, I'd say, pretty overwhelmingly positive here.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. And it's also, I'll say, great to hear a Democratic representative that clearly you understand these issues. When I talk to Democratic legislators here, they've got no clue. I talked to the chair of the state party about the coal miner strike and about a paper mill lockout, and asked him, now that you're elected state chair, what are you going to do? And he's like, oh, I have no idea about these things, no idea at all. Do you see yourself as part of a party in Michigan that is like-minded and similarly knowledgeable about these issues, or do you find yourself kind of fighting against the current?
I think there is certainly an understanding and knowledge gap. Something that I think has happened in the Democratic Party since 2016 is that the electorate has realigned, and in that realignment, a lot of suburbs that used to be formerly, pretty conservative Republican have become pretty overwhelmingly Democratic. With that has, brought us some electoral success across the country, but those voters don't necessarily have, backgrounds with organized labor. They might or probably have a parent, that maybe was a union member, or a grandparent, as like in my case, but they don't have a lot of direct experience. And I don't think there's a broad enough understanding. And I do think that it's incumbent upon those of us, kind of in the movement and in general, to really do good outreach and education. Because I think in general, most Democrats, especially elected Democrats, know that, unions are important and that labor is a force for good, but I think they're fuzzy on the details. And those details are the things that let special interest groups kind of, drive a wedge in and say, oh, well, you're going too far with this one. Why do you want to do this? And they don't really know why they want to do it. And so I think there is that information gap, and we have to do what we can to close it. As in my vision, the labor movement is the way forward. I think that it's by far of all the political movements out there, the greatest force of good that's existed.
Absolutely. So, Representative, is there anything else going on in Michigan that our listeners here in Alabama should know about as something to maybe potentially replicate, or even keep an eye out for?
Yeah, so I think there's two things that we've been doing that I think have been pretty effective. One is that our governor and our legislature also has taken to messaging around even social issues as being matters of like worker and workplace safety. So we recently expanded our state's Civil Rights Act to include protection for LGBTQ people. Up until that becomes effectively law, it's been legal in Michigan for employers to fire somebody for being gay or trans. And so we rectified that. And the message that we've sent forward is that, these social issues, these civil rights issues are economic and workplace issues, that people, need to feel safe in their jobs. They need to feel protected in their jobs. And so, repealing our abortion ban, expanding our Civil Rights Act, these aren't just matters of civil rights and social justice. These are fundamentally economic issues. And then the second thing is that we've been, kind of taking a broadly holistic look at all of these anti-labor laws. So aside from repealing right to work and reinstating prevailing wage, we've got a bill that's been moving through to start to rectify restricted terms of bargaining for teachers. There's a pretty terrible law that we've got that doesn't require schools to compensate teachers if contract negotiations run past the deadline date, which effectively neuters teachers' ability to bargain. We've got a few other bills out there to enable project labor agreements, get rid of those local preemption laws that I mentioned earlier, and a few, I think, exciting ideas too. Like we're working on a tax credit for union dues, maybe taking a look at some just cause legislation. I've got a personal goal of trying to get some form of co-determination done in the state, but I think that's probably a long-term goal. So I think there's a lot of really cool ideas that we're working on. And, I personally want Michigan to, kind of embrace that labor history that it's had and act as an incubator for these ideas so that other states and, other groups can see what we're doing and, know that it can be done and, have a model and a template.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is super, super exciting. And it's so cool knowing that, there's somebody like you with these that's really thinking about this kind of stuff that's in the house there. Have you, are you aware of the, what they called in the Labour Party in the UK, the right of first refusal? Are you aware of any of those proposals?
I don't think there's anything in the works yet on that, but there should be. So that's a good point.
Yeah, well, would love to see something like that go through. I know here in Alabama, we've had this issue with child labor at the Hyundai suppliers all across the state. I mean, there's been 4 that have been shown to have been utilizing child labor, and then 6 more just in the state. I don't know how there are 10 Hyundai manufacturers in the state of Alabama. It's bizarre, but how many of these places do we need? But there are 6 more under investigation for child labor. And so one of the things that Hyundai is doing is they're going to be divesting from these suppliers. Some of them were wholly owned subsidiaries, some of them were majority owned, and they're going to be divesting their shares from it. And so it seems obvious to me that the workers should have the first right to refuse, that somebody's going to be buying this. Somebody's going to be buying these suppliers, and it ought to be Alabama's workers, the people who made who made these factories run. They should get a shot to run it before some private equity group from New York or DC comes and buys it and cuts jobs and cuts wages and does all these things to that we see these private equity firms do all the time. Alabama workers should get a shot at running it, and the government should give them a loan. But obviously that's not going to happen. And probably what will happen is that there will be a private equity firm buy it, and it's going to get even worse. Maybe there won't be any child labor, but the working conditions are almost certain to get even worse. And it's just really sad.
They'll close some of the factories. They'll consolidate operations. That's always what happens.
Yeah.
Something kind of on the same vein as that, we've been working on banning non-compete clauses. Very similar workforce issue that you see when company comes in and takes over and lays off workforce, is that these non-compete clauses prevent people from re-entering the workforce, often forces them out of their community and sometimes out of the state, depending on the industry that you're in, because of how they're worded. And they've gotten, I think, more broadly used by industries that really have no right using them. One thing when you're using a non-compete clause to protect some kind of trade secret, another thing altogether when it's like a restaurant.
Right. Which there are people that don't believe that Jimmy John's had a non-compete clause, and that it's true. Restaurants do have, some of them have non-compete clauses. It's just totally bizarre. We had somebody in the chat ask, what is co-determination? Joey, can you explain that for folks?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to 10,000-foot view. That it's a pretty large framework, but so essentially what co-determination does is it gives workers a voice in the operations of the companies. It can take a few different forms. There's shop floor co-determination, where you have workers taking a direct role in how safety standards are implemented, and how certain workplace procedures are done. The broader form of co-determination involves giving labor unions or workers' councils a seat on the boards of these companies. It's pretty widely practiced in most European countries. Germany has a pretty aggressive form of co-determination, where most boards have multiple members from the trade unions sitting on them. And essentially the goal of co-determination is not necessarily to totally wrest power from the company, but to give workers a say in what happens. And what in practice ends up happening is it creates a more copacetic working relationship between management and the trades unions, because the workers feel like they have a voice in hiring and firing decisions and layoffs, in expansions, that sort of thing. And on the flip side, the board gets a direct kind of line into what's going on the floor and what the workers are experiencing. And so a lot of the if you talk to a lot of manufacturers in countries like Germany and the Netherlands, they'll actually tell you that they think co-determination has been a net boost for productivity and their relationships with their trade unions, that sort of thing. We have a strange prohibition in the Taft-Hartley Act against workers' councils. It's a well-intentioned prohibition, I think, that was initially meant to stop employers from creating pseudo unions that weren't real unions to prevent actual labor organizing. But the way it's worded in practice, it just sort of prohibits workers' councils. But we think that there's some room to work around it, at least to do some of that board level co-determination and some of the shop floor implementation sorts of things. But it I think is one of those things that could be pretty American labor movement if we could get it to catch on.
Absolutely. So you're saying that there may be some benefit to having an actual Starbucks worker seated in the boardroom instead of an empty chair there. That's
the funny thing is, in most of the rest of the world, the CEOs and board agree with that there is value in that, and that you want to have a good working relationship with your trades union. It's hard to imagine because of how hostile our relationships are with our, in the United States, but it turns out you can actually have a good working relationship.
Yeah, well, one of the big, and we saw this at the Starbucks hearing last week, one of the criticisms was like, oh, unions are too antagonistic. And, unions can be antagonistic, and I think to a certain extent they really ought to be, right? But unions are clearly, especially in the American context, they would love to not be antagonistic. And how do I know that? We can look at the last 50 years of American labor history to point to say that unions would love to not be antagonistic. But, when we're not, the owning class here in this country just takes and takes and takes and takes. So, there's reason for some amount of antagonism there.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about power dynamics, right? I mean, that is the core of what this is about. Unions exist to balance power dynamics. And, I tell everybody all the time when strikes and stuff come up, nobody wants to be on strike. Workers don't want to be on strike. Management doesn't want to strike. No one wins when there's a strike. But a strike is it's sort of like a declaration of war. It's diplomacy by other means. We've tried negotiating, we've tried working things out peacefully, and that didn't work. So now we're shutting things down until we get good faith negotiations again. And I think to outside observers, it looks like antagonism and agitating, but if you don't do it, if that those options aren't on the table, if that the ability to be antagonistic isn't there, then capital will trample over labor.
Right. Joey Andrews, representative for the 38th House District in the state of Michigan. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us this morning. I've really enjoyed it.
It was a great experience. If you guys ever want to chat again, happy to do it.
Absolutely.
Thanks
Probably
so much.
will.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right, folks. We're going to go ahead and take a break really quick, and we'll be right back to wrap this thing up.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBEW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBEW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBEW558.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at IAMAW44.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3333. 3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters, we care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can send us a text message at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Last thing that we are going to get to today is that those bad things that you wanted to say about your previous job, well, you're now free to say them, according to NLRB General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzo. She sent a memo to regional offices of the National Labor Relations Board addressing what had been a large question resulting from a previous ruling about non-disclosure agreements. They had made a previous ruling about the non-disparagement agreements. And so the question was, does it retroactively void broad non-disparagement agreements that were designed or that were signed prior to the February ruling? So there was a ruling in February, but there was some question about, hey, does it apply to contracts that were signed in the past? Does it invalidate them if they were signed in the past? And the answer is that yes, it does. Abruzzo wrote that the decision, in fact, does have, quote, retroactive application, meaning that already signed and, quote, overly broad non-disparagement clauses are no longer considered valid by the National Labor Relations Board. Employers who attempt to continue to enforce those illegal severance clauses could face trouble from the National Labor Relations Board, according to Vice. So while the NLRB typically has a 6-month statute of limitations for labor violations, businesses who attempt to enforce illegal parts of an older severance agreements would be committing a contemporary violation and subject to enforcement. Additionally, Abruzzo provided clarification around what non-disparagement and confidentiality clauses may still be considered legal. Those provisions must be narrowly tailored, quote unquote. In the case of confidentiality, the clause must serve to keep proprietary trade information secret, quote, for a period of time based on legitimate business justifications. That might be considered lawful, but it must not have a, quote, chilling effect that precludes employees from assisting others or communicating with the media, a union, or third parties. So, narrowly tailored. If there's a legitimate, there's this trade secret that, is a secret sauce for your company, you can tell your former employees, okay, you can't go spreading this around, but just general non-disparagement clauses about your working conditions or the pay that you received or the interactions between you and your employer, too broad. That's illegal. It is no longer valid. With regards to non-disparagement, Abruzzo similarly said that the provision must not only be both narrowly tailored and justified, but it is limited to statements by an employee that fit the legal definition of defamation, meaning they are purposely and maliciously untrue. That is the only kind of non-disparagement. That is the only kind of disparagement that could still be, you still couldn't do under an old agreement, right? You can't legally defame somebody. You cannot purposely and maliciously tell a lie about your former employer, which I think that a lot of us, we don't have to make up lies to badmouth our former bosses.
Yeah, some of us have stories of our own.
Yeah.
And boy, doesn't it feel good knowing you've gotten the green light to go tell that story.
There you go. So next week we can open up the phone lines and you can give us a call at 844-899-TVLR and tell us your bad boss stories. Now that Jennifer Abruzzo has freed you from the shackles of your NDA. We look forward to hearing those stories.
Absolutely. Always send those in.
Yep. So as we're wrapping up, we've got a few, we've got just a few plugs that we wanted to hit, and then we're going to be heading into overtime. So make sure that if you're listening to us on the radio, you find us online, Facebook, YouTube. We're going to continue streaming for another hour and a half. We have some more guests coming on from the International Association of Machinists, talking about some cool stuff, and then we're going to be spending a lot of time reacting to this Starbucks hearing. So going to be a lot of fun. Stay tuned for that. But the ACLU of Alabama is holding a Work the Ledge virtual session on Monday, April the 10th at 6 p.m. It's a legislative advocacy training program for everyday Alabamians who want to learn and engage in Alabama's legislative process. And that session's topic is prisons and the death penalty. Alabama Arise is having a lobby day on April 11th, and you can register online. Register at alarise.org/2023 Legislative Day, as seating is limited. Arise members will gather for a policy briefing and lunch, followed by a news conference on the steps of the Alabama State House, followed by legislative visits, and finishing with a membership meeting. If you're interested in going to Montgomery to talk to representatives, this is a great opportunity. And speaking of lobby days, the Alabama AFL is conducting their lobby day on April 5th with the Roadkill Barbecue in Montgomery. If you go to that, you'll be able to see me there. That's an annual gathering of union and political folks. So make sure that your local union is sending somebody, and if they're not, maybe you can be that somebody. The North Alabama Labor Council has a barbecue that's been scheduled for April 22nd on Earth Day. It's going to take place at Montesano State Park. So if you're a union member, an ally, a working person here in the Tennessee Valley, come on down to Montesano. David has previously said we got to get that confirmation from him for this time, but I think it's safe to say we can anticipate some of David's barbecue, and it's going to be great. Alabamians for Fair Justice is holding a lobby day on April 4th to advocate around criminal justice bills. The grand opening of the Automotive Free Clinic will be 1 p.m. on April 15th on South Memorial Drive in Prattville, Alabama. Labor Notes continues with their online trainings, and with that, we're going to go ahead and head into overtime. Find us on YouTube and Facebook to continue listening. All power to the workers. And with that, we're off the radio. We are now in overtime, second half of the program, where we are online only. We have broken free from the shackles of the FCC, and we appreciate you continuing to hang out with us. So we are, like I said, going to be talking to some railroad workers from the Machinists Union, running for leadership in their union. We're also going to be spending a lot of time on the Starbucks hearing, reacting to several clips from that. And we have a couple other stories that we think we're going to be able to get to. So make sure that you continue listening, and we will be right back with Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party age player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party age player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
The Valley Labor Report. We are now in overtime. Second half of Alabama's only Union Talk radio program. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. And we've got some great stuff for you today, folks. We're going to be looking at a CNN columnist telling us to work longer. Lots of great there. Reacting to a Starbucks hearing in the Senate. And talking to some railroad machinists about running for the top offices of their union. So
Yeah, definitely got a lot going on. Before we get into it, I did want to remind folks that we have Shop Talk. That is our new Thursday morning episode every Thursday morning.
That's right. What did you do on Shop Talk a few days ago?
Yeah, just this past Thursday, I had Professor Max Frazier. He is an assistant history professor at the University of Miami. He formerly wrote for The Nation, Dissent Magazine, all sorts of cool publications. And he talked a little bit about his journey in studying the working class, and specifically about his new book he has coming out this fall called Hillbilly Highway, all about really this migration trend of Southern working class folks moving to the Rust Belt, into the Midwest to enter the manufacturing workforce. So he looked at some small towns like Jamestown, Tennessee, for example, and he kept running into people up in Indiana who have their roots down here. And so he the story sort of fell into his lap and became a book that he's releasing this fall. But yeah, we had a great chat about labor history, including some of the stereotypes, that have come out about the South and, especially as it relates to labor. So really enjoyed that. I was definitely feeling under the weather on Thursday morning, so I was thankful that Max was a great guest and he could just sort of take it away. But that's the sort of thing we do on Shop Talk. We do history, we do education, we do training. Anything that's labor, education, history, or training, Shop Talk is the place for that. Our goal is that, at least one episode a month, hopefully, you could share with your union. Whether it's something in the labor history realm that you find interesting, or if it's more tailored towards the training and education piece. For example, last week I did a session on how to get engaged as a new member, or how to get engaged as a member, period, right? Not even necessarily a new member, but someone who's looking to get involved in their union. What does that mean? How do you do that? Right, so that was out last week. It should be available as a podcast. It comes out every Thursday morning, streaming on Facebook and YouTube, and then released as a podcast, in the following days. So if you have ideas, send them our way. I've already received some really great topic suggestions, some of which I think are going to be in next week's episode. So. Appreciate the folks
have you
tuning
got
into
next
that.
week's episode kind of planned out roughly already?
Roughly, yeah. I think we're going to take a look. It's the first week of our first episode of the new month. So, of course, we're going to look at some April anniversaries in labor history. And then I've got an idea about some local labor history, thanks to some inspiration from the comments section. So, stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to listening. Folks definitely ought to check that out. Live every Thursday morning and drops as a podcast the following Monday.
So. Absolutely.
So one thing that we wanted to talk about, and this is kind of an opportunity for some education as well, is the NPR workers unionized a while back, and they are still in contract negotiations, and the union says, the workers say that management is stalling. They're not negotiating in good faith, and they're not, giving them a fair contract. And so instead of taking the step right now to go on strike, what they're doing is what's called a work to rule campaign. And so specifically in their instance, they've said on Twitter that they will be refusing to pick up work outside of their job description. They're going to be working their scheduled hours and not a minute more, and taking company Slack off of our phones and setting away messages when they're not at work.
Love it.
So that's, that's a really good... work to rule campaigns are really cool because everybody's job has rules or expectations that are beyond its scope. That the job, it's really difficult to accomplish the job without. If you've been working for a place long enough, you know that there are shortcuts that is in the manual. It's supposed to be done a certain way, but nobody does it that way because it takes way too long. Or everybody knows that, maybe you're scheduled from 8 to 4, but in actuality, everybody works till 6. or, you're answering, like taking Slack off of your phone. You're answering messages all hours of the day and all hours of the weekend, every day, all day and all night. You're on call, basically, doing work at all hours, and you're not being compensated for that, right? That's an expectation, but it's not in the job description. It's not in the scope of work, and it's but you do it to make sure that the work product gets done, to make sure that you're able to have that deliverable on time, to make sure that your company continues to perform and continues to excel, because most workers want to be able to deliver that deliverable. They want to be able to be successful and have that product. And so sometimes we are willing to go above and beyond and, and below in some cases, to make sure that the job gets done and the job gets done well. But when we're being taken advantage of, and when, especially during a contract campaign where, where we're not being respected at the bargaining table, then work to rule campaigns are a really good way to exactly follow the rules to the T as kind of a first step of escalation leading towards potentially a strike if it has to get to that level, because nobody wants to strike, right? Everybody wants to stay at work, continue collecting their paychecks and all this type of stuff, but sometimes strikes are necessary. And so
right, and when strikes are necessary, it's usually the culmination of multiple things that have escalated, a series of escalating actions that culminates in the strike as part of an organizing campaign. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Work to rule is an excellent way to organize in the workplace, to possibly prepare for a strike should it have to come to that. Mm-hmm. The thing about work to rule that's so great is you're not violating anything. You are following the rules. Here, one example that, of course, sticks with me is teachers. Teachers are often scheduled, at least around here in this area, their contract hours, per se, is 7:45 a.m. to 3:15 p.m. In reality, of course, they're all there before 7:45 a.m. They're all there past 3:15 p.m. They work far more than a 7.5-hour day. But what if? What if all the teachers at a school decided, you know what, we are going to show up at 7:45 and we are going to walk out of here at 3:15, and no, you're not getting any emails afterwards. No, we're not taking home work to grade. No, we're not going to upload the grades or upload your lesson plans late at night or on the weekends. We will just work when you are technically paying us to work. Yeah, would love to see how that goes. I know I've seen, I remember a campaign years back in Hawaii with Hawaii educators who did that. Can't remember all the details, but that's one that sticks out in my memory, would be Hawaii educators who did that. And what they did was at 3:15, or the equivalent time, whenever they were technically released from their contract time, they went out on the road and had a picket in front of the school. And of course, by that, there's still parents picking up kids at that point. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to organize and to build capacity for your union and in your workplace. And like I said, the brilliant beauty of it is you're actually just doing what you're technically supposed to do, just nothing more. And it helps folks realize how much more they really give and how much more they've been expected to take on that they're not being compensated for. It's not being accounted for maybe in the policy manual. So shout out to the NPR workers for doing what you're doing. I wish you much success. And also, really, I hope folks will learn from this, and maybe there's someone listening who now has the idea of work to rule as a possible campaign tactic. You'd be surprised how effective it could be.
Absolutely. So, next story we've got is there's a CNN writer, CNN columnist, and author who, according to her Substack, she writes about women's rights, politics, foreign affairs, and law. Other places call her a feminist. So Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. I support feminism. I support women's rights. Maybe women's rights in the workplace, things like that. But are you familiar with Jill Filipovich?
It's one of those names that rings a bell. Like, I'm sure I've seen her byline before, but, not someone I would follow closely by any means.
Well, last week on Twitter, she decided to opine about the retirement age. And I'll just read the tweet verbatim for you here. She says, "I'm sure I'm opening a giant can of worms here, but it seems fine to raise the retirement age very slightly in nations where populations are healthier and living longer." She ends it with a question mark there. And she does that from Kenya on a safari/yoga retreat with other writers.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. Yeah. Just love to talk about cutting benefits for folks while I'm on my safari/yoga retreat.
I mean,
in another continent. Yes.
Could you? I just honestly, that baffles the mind to be the idea that you could be sunbathing on the other side of the world and, phone in your hand, tweet away about like how, is it possible that working people have it too good? I wonder if that's the case. Maybe it'd be fine if working people had it a little worse. Maybe that would be fine. I mean, it's just super bizarre to me.
I'm willing to make a concession here. I know I'm not normally one for concessions, but I'm willing to make one in this case.
Okay, let's see.
Jill and everyone who attended the safari/yoga retreat, their new retirement age is now 75. Okay. Everybody else, we're going to lower it. We're going to lower it. Go. We're going to have a much better retirement age. I think we should just lower it to 60. Why not?
Right. Yeah.
Screw it. Let's go to 60, except for Jill. Jill and her friends, they've enjoyed a safari yoga retreat. I imagine that added quite a bit to their quality of life. And so I'm sure they'll have no problem working until they're 75.
Right.
I mean, how hard can it be, really, to just crank out some tweets for CNN? Yeah.
I could do that. I could probably do that till 75. I don't know if I would want to, but I probably could.
Yeah. So she gets to work till 75. I see her point. I'm sure having a yoga retreat means that she's probably healthier than I am. So yeah, she is more than welcome to work very slightly longer. But for the rest of us, no, actually, we aren't down for a cut in our retirement. Not cool.
Yeah. Pittsburgh Dude 87 in the chat mentions that life expectancy has fallen in the U.S. in the last few years. And that's actually exactly the point that another progressive, quote unquote, made in the replies to this tweet, Brianna Wu. Are you familiar, Adam, with Brianna Wu?
Not really. Not really, no.
Okay. So Brianna Wu is, from her Wikipedia page, she is an American video game developer and computer programmer. She kind of came to fame, in my understanding, from Gamergate as one of the oppositional figures to the weird kind of...
So she was maybe one of the women that was being...
Yes.
Attacked with stupid vitriol by weirdos on the internet?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Okay? And so now she is, if you go find her on Twitter, she is the executive director of Rebellion PAC. And Rebellion PAC is one of these, PACs that's supposed to be, like, oh, we're the fighting progressives. We take no corporate money, they say. They say we take no corporate money. They've got a code of ethics. And so, look, you read this and you think, oh, maybe this is a person that's like progressive. That's what you would immediately think. That would be your immediate assumption there. But she replies to this tweet of Jill Filipovich's saying, I would normally agree, ? But have you seen that life expectancy has actually been falling in the United States? And so, so Brianna comes into this conversation, just this absolutely wild tweet from, one of the most privileged people in the world talking about how working people should maybe work longer. And she is, as a, supposedly fighting progressive, she jumps in and says, yeah, you know what? I would normally agree with that. I would normally agree that working people might actually have it too good and they should be working longer. But now life expectancy in the United States has fallen, so maybe we want to, maybe we want to wait a little while before we tell working people to work longer. Just wild.
Yeah, so I mean, presumably, if life expectancy is not declining somewhere else, in Europe perhaps, I assume that Ms. Wu would prefer they work longer and have less of a retirement pension.
And that seems to be what came of their conversation, because Jill says, "Oh yeah, I know. I was talking about France." And then
guess what? I don't want French workers to take a cut either.
Right.
Why should they? They should not. And more power to them for fighting back. It looks like it's so far not stopped it. But, I really have a lot of respect for the unions and the workers in France who have been fighting tooth and nail to defend their retirement. And I think there's a lot we can learn from that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, it's just really pitiful when you have these privileged folks literally on vacation.
Right.
Bemoaning how good we have it as people in this country. And it's just, they clearly have a very different reality than most of us experience.
Exactly. And to address it on its own merits, would it be fine? I mean, if we define fine as, the world wouldn't end if in France they increased the retirement age from, 62 to 64? Is that what they're going for? It would not, the end of the world wouldn't happen. That wouldn't be the literal worst thing that could happen to French workers. But the question is, with the increased productivity that workers have all across the country since the Industrial Revolution, should all of the benefits from that productivity go to the bosses? Should it go to the owners? Should it go to the capitalists, as has been the case since the 70s and the 80s? Or should workers be able to retain some of it in the form of lengthening our retirement? And the answer to that, in my mind, is obviously the latter. Workers should obviously be the beneficiary, at least in part, of the explosive increase in productivity that we have seen over the past 5, 6, 7, 8, the last century. And the idea that the idea that people, that thought leaders, that politicians would have any other proposal is baffling to me. If it comes from if you're not coming from just an from just a evil maximizing place, right? If you want to maximize, the amount of evil in the world, or you would just want to maximize the amount of money in some rich person's bank account, I can understand that. But if you are at all concerned with a fair distribution of wealth and resources, the idea that working people should have to toil longer is absurd. It is absolutely absurd. In fact, because of the rise in productivity over the last century, we should be looking at lowering the retirement age and ensuring that more people have more leisure time. Or maybe instead of lowering the retirement age, maybe we cut the work week, right? That's another thing that back in the 30s, John Maynard Keynes said he would anticipate in 100 years that the work week is down to 15 hours because of the increase in productivity.
Right.
But instead of that, instead of people working less because of the increase in our productivity, we are now, in some cases, actually working more than we did 30, 40 years ago and making the same amount of money and working longer because all of the increases in productivity are going to the top instead of to the workers.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think in this day and age, for anyone to discuss cuts to Social Security or other retirement is totally egregious. We should not be looking at cuts. We should be looking at enhancements to the benefits, whether that's paying more because so many of our seniors are just barely making ends meet. Lowering the retirement age. There's a lot we could do and should do to take better care of folks who have labored their entire life. They've spent, the best years of their life laboring in our economy. To say that they should have to work a couple more years, that we should cut their benefits, there's a reason why French workers are protesting like they are, and I applaud them for doing so, and we should do the same here to defend the Social Security pension and all pensions of folks in this country.
Absolutely. And I do, just to be fair, because I'm interested in fairness. I have an opinion, but I do want to be fair. She did reply to that tweet. Now, Brianna just deleted her tweet, and I asked her because she deleted it after I quote tweeted her and, was like, what is this? A progressive saying that, working people should work longer. She deleted that tweet after that. And so I asked her if she deleted it because she realizes it was wrong, or why did she delete it? And she didn't answer. So who knows what Brianna's views are on this question. But Jill did reply, and she said, quote, lots of totally unhinged vitriol because Twitter is still Twitter, but also lots of interesting responses here. Happy to admit I'm wrong. Hopefully we're all entitled to one truly terrible, poorly thought out, shouldn't have been tweeted take per year, and hopefully I've just used my one up. Seriously, this was dumb of me. Wish I could delete, but I think that'll make folks angrier, so hopefully this will suffice. So, there we go.
Yeah, and I do give her credit for saying that. I mean, obviously she didn't have to. She could have doubled down. She didn't. Is she just backing down because she got piled on? Sure. I'm sure that's what it is, and this is just, some damage control. But that said, credit where credit is due. She said something stupid, and she's admitted it was stupid. But unfortunately, there are people with much more power than her who have that same stupid idea.
Right. And she's probably not going to be writing any columns about how we need to lower the retirement age anytime soon. She's probably just going to, move on.
Yeah, that's quite the brand of feminism, though.
Right.
Guess it need not apply after a certain age. Huh?
Right. Have we got Reese and Nathaniel in the Zoom?
I do believe so. Let me check here and make sure. Yes, we do. So, yeah.
All right.
Excited about that.
Good deal. So, we have on the line Reese Murtaugh and Nathaniel Tinsley. They are both running for leadership in for the District Lodge 19 of the International Association of Machinists. The International Association of Machinists, they have district lodges that are not geographic, they are industrial. And so, for example, their District Lodge 141 represents airline workers, and their District Lodge 19 represents railroad workers. And so they're running for leadership positions in District Lodge 19. Nathaniel, Reese, thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So let's first start off with, I guess, just what y'all do and your history with the union, and then we'll get into what you're running for and the campaign and some of your reasons for running. And so, Nathaniel Tinsley, what's your job and what's your history been with the Association of Machinists?
Well, my job is locomotive technician. We work on everything from rebuilding engines all the way down to wheel truing. My history with the union is I've held multiple positions in the local level. I'm also a delegate to the Kansas State Council of Machinists. Currently, I actually am the legislative chairman for the local. I've been involved in labor activism pretty much my entire life. My dad was a union steward of IBEW for a major power company out here. I advocate for labor, and I've been involved in many, we could call it protests or just labor activism in general. I've always been involved with that. So that's pretty much in a nutshell.
And where are you from?
Kansas City, Missouri is where I live, and I work in The locomotive facility in Kansas City, actually in Kansas, Argentine LMIT.
Okay. And then Reese Murtaugh, am I pronouncing that right?
Murtaugh.
Okay. And I think I actually recognize you from CNN during the coverage of the rail strike. So we've got a big name here this morning.
You got to call when you get a chance. You got to call them out.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Well, I appreciated your segment on CNN, and it's not often that places like that will talk to workers. So that it's always cool to see that. Talk to us about what you do and some of your history with the union.
So I'm a roadway mechanic for CSX Railroad. I work on heavy equipment that repairs the rails. I spent about half my career as a field mechanic, traveling from Florida to New York, out west to Indiana, where CSX operates in. I am the local chairman of Lodge 696 out of Richmond, Virginia. We have a big shop here in Richmond where we rebuild heavy equipment. We re-engineer it. We do welding. We have our own paint shop. And we actually build our own machine right here in Richmond, Virginia from the ground up. So it's a neat building. We have a lot of very smart, experienced mechanics. And as a local chairman, I represent them for discipline. I negotiate things on a local level. And I'm their voice on a local level, and just try to keep the carriers somewhat fair.
Right. And I know you've got a big job on your hands with that. And so, what are you running for within the district?
I'm going for the top spot. I am going for the president of District Lodge 19.
Wow. Okay. And then, Nathaniel, what about you?
General chairman, one of 9 positions for general chairman.
Okay. And so explain to us, Reese is running for the president and then general chairman in the district lodge. What is I think people can imagine the president is kind of the top guy, but what does a general chairman do?
The general chairman represents a region, would be like a region of railroaders. It'll be like multiple railroads, CSX, UP, BNSF, even some short line railroads. So basically a geographic area, cover, could be a couple thousand people. You'd be involved in arbitration, negotiating local agreements, trying to help people stay out of trouble and fight for their jobs, help them organize on the shop floor, to combat some of the tactics that the carriers use.
Gotcha. And so, Reese, I imagine that y'all's campaign in District Lodge 19 and y'all are running somebody for I think it is every one of the open positions, if not everyone, then most of them. I imagine that a lot of this kind of stems from the recent round of contract negotiations with the railroads. Is that right?
Yes, that was my catalyst. For me, that moment was water boiling out of a pot, right? It was just it was the breaking point. The carriers don't negotiate in good faith. The union, our union at least, they've been in cruise control for a long time. We've continually lost ground. And then when we voted to strike, and then we met all the requirements in the Railway Labor Act where we had every legal right to strike. And then when the union just decided on their own to continually push the strike date back, I couldn't just sit by and watch it happen and then let them cruise into an election unopposed. So they pissed off the wrong person. And I was running solo for the president's job just to give him a hard time. And then as my campaign kind of grew and there was just a movement of angry railroaders who reached out, and I put a team together, and it's really been just a grassroots amazing thing happening here. Our election process is very complicated. We've already won 2 elections just to get on the national ballot. We had to win a nomination election, which required 15% of all local lodges across the nation to endorse us. That's from Texas to Minnesota to California to Virginia. Then we had to win a runoff vote, which required we had to win 15% of those. So we won about 20 to 25% of the membership's vote so far. And we did not raise any money for those first 2 elections. It was all just a scrappy grassroots campaign of pissed off railroaders.
That's pretty impressive to have no campaign funds and to be able to do that. And when you're talking about 20 to 25% of the membership, how many people are we talking about there that have in some way or another supported this campaign by voting?
So there's 7,500 members in District Lodge 19. Now, the voting for these union officer elections is very anemic. I mean, we're trying to overcome this apathy, and that's why we're in this position of weakness, because all the guys that are pissed off don't vote. Part of the reason is the communication from the union is just pathetic. The email list they have is 881 members out of 7,500 members. Yes, so campaigning, I'm allowed to have access to the email list, right? Because I'm running a campaign, the DOL, there's DOL laws.
Right.
Well, the email list is 12% of the members, so it's not really helping me out, right? And to make things even more interesting, the union decided to use a third-party company to send emails out, and I'm charged $700 to send out an email blast to 881 people.
Brother, we could get you a better deal than that, I think.
I'm in the wrong business.
Right. Yeah. Seriously.
Man.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
It's a stacked deck, man. I mean,
you can almost snail mail people for that amount of money.
That's exactly. It's almost the same price. So that's what we're doing now. Is the email list is such a joke that we're having to do snail mail. So we just launched a GoFundMe. We've hooked up with a great print shop. It's a Teamsters print shop here in Richmond, Virginia, Gibson Printing. He's hooking us up. He's really helping us out. Hell of a good guy. So that's kind of where we're at. Is it's just people don't know we exist, and that's the battle we're at. Because when people found out about us, they're like, we have a website, and they like, hell yeah, I want to have a choice. Like, there should be an election. And that's kind of the battle we're at right now. The union's controlling the information.
And so and so you've had in some way or another 20% of the union already vote for you. So you've already had more than the union's email list support your campaign in some way.
Yeah, so we're pretty big on social media. There's a lot of these guys. There's a Facebook site where everyone kind of piles in, and a lot of really good debate and open conversation in there. So that's basically that's been kind of a tool that we have that they don't have, right?
Right. And so then I guess I'm interested in some of the, I can certainly understand frustration with a union leadership that doesn't seem to be as activated as they really ought to be in an important moment. And so I understand why folks are interested in I would understand why folks would be interested in basically anything, right? But I think my understanding is that you're running on, yes, I want to change stuff. I want the union to be more active. I want the union, but my understanding is that you put some thought into, what are the specific things that you would be changing as president of District Lodge 19. Is that right?
That's right. So one of the things is the bylaws, right? So as leaders, we cannot change the bylaws, but we can start a conversation and let people know that these bylaws aren't democratic and they need overhaul. So that's part of what we're doing now is we're trying to start this conversation where our officers, their pay is not linked to what they negotiate in the National Freight Rail contract. So they have no skin in the game, which is horrible for negotiations, right? They get a yearly cost of living raise, and it's really ridiculous. And most of the members don't even know about it. And so part of what we're doing is we're just trying to educate. But as far as our platform, we are really a simple bunch. We want transparency. We want honesty. So we're obviously trying to improve communication. So the low-hanging fruit here is we're going to make an email list if we get elected. You know, that is a campaign promise. I feel like we can deliver on it.
Okay.
And,
Right. I mean, I know that sounds simple, but that's so important.
Hasn't been done yet. So yeah. So independence, we are going to operate the district autonomously. We are all railroaders. We know what's best for us, right? We don't need the IAM, pulling strings here. We don't need, Biden or Marty Walsh telling them, no, you guys aren't striking. If our members vote as leaders, it's our obligation and duty to follow through with this vote. And the last thing is improving the union democracy, just having fair elections. The Department of Labor has these standards of what you can and can't do, but there's nothing that says you can't go above the DOL standards, right? So, fair elections ensure that the officers represent the interests of the members. So it's really, like I say, we're really just getting back to the basics. I don't want to speak for all the rail unions, but a lot of the leadership has just grown comfortable. It's hard to, obviously I'm seeing it's hard to win an election, and there's not much accountability. So I think getting back to these principles will really hopefully improve all the rail unions when they see one doing it. Other ones, might be a cautionary tale to kind of clean up their own thing. But
Right. I saw a TikTok the other day. This guy was recounting an ad for mayor of Philadelphia, and the guy was something like, I will ensure trash is collected in a reasonable amount of time. I will, collect any car that has been left on the road for more than a month or something like this, and it was like there were three things, and it was not anything, outlandish, but it was just like, that's a reasonable, that seems accomplishable, and it's not being done. So that should be done. And this, the campaign kind of reminds me of that.
Well, and the thing to me that I really respect what you guys are doing, because it takes a lot to put yourself out there as a candidate for union office. These union elections, like you said, are often met with a lot of complacency and a lack of participation, a lack of engagement. And frankly, there are leaders over the years who've preferred it that way. And, what I believe is that it's up to militant rank and filers to democratically revitalize our unions, whether that's on the rails or in the schools, in the factories, wherever it is. It seems to be an issue we have in our labor movement. And we have to really revitalize things from the bottom up, because these unions are institutions that have been beleaguered by apathy and atrophy over time. And, I think it's up to us, the militant activists, the workers who are paying attention, the workers who get pissed off like you. I think it's up to us to save the labor movement from the bottom up. And I think, y'all are an example of how you can do that by challenging, by ensuring there is a choice in union elections, by presenting a platform. And because I remember running for an election, and I actually had a platform, and people were confused because they didn't know that that's something that was done. So talk about kind of the low hanging fruit and stuff. So I know what you're talking about there. And I really applaud the efforts and applaud you guys stepping out and doing that, because we need a lot more folks willing to step up and do the same.
Yeah, and Nathaniel, he was talking about some of the reasons that he started, and it sounds like Reese kind of got the ball rolling on this. But is there anything else that you wanted to add as to why you decided to join, or to flesh out any of the other motivations behind y'all's caucus?
I've been on the railroad for 16 years, and in that time, and also speaking with some of the guys that have already worked at the railroad for 30 years. I mean, they're pissed off, they're frustrated with the union leadership, and it's just decades in the making. And I couldn't stand back and just see these guys run unopposed. I believe that the workers should have a choice. I think competition's good for our organization. Here at Argentine, we were able to, I got to give those guys a shout out, because we had about 100 people come out and vote. And, we had the biggest turnout in the nominations of any other local. And I think that really speaks to, it speaks to the bigger picture for the machinists of how people feel about the leadership we currently have. But, I agree with you guys 100% about, we're all in this together, all organizations, we're all in this together. But for machinists, I believe in a bottom up approach, that the more we engage people, the better we're going to do. The more that our membership is educated on all the rules and regulations and all that, and that we come together and fight together, stand together, I think that we'll do much better.
And Nathaniel, you mentioned that there is a sense that, like, yes, this is a machinist's problem that we're trying to fix here, but that there's more to it outside of your own union. And I understand that over the course of these the issue with the rail negotiations, the Railroad Workers United were front and center really in the national conversation. How connected are y'all with Railroad Workers United?
We talk.
Gotcha. And how inspired do y'all see your own campaign with the some other reform slates in the past couple of years that have been successful, like in the UAW and the Teamsters?
Yeah, so it seems like there's a movement, which is amazing, right? Because there needs to be just a kick in the ass here, right? And there needs to be it's just a complacency and an apathy and that's not what a union is supposed to be about. We're supposed to be these activists, right? And then if we see an injustice, we act. If it's a rail carrier, or once you get trained and become a troublemaker, you might look around and see injustice in your own union, and that's what's going on in the machinist. And I can tell you that I've had a few different people, I'm not going to say what unions, from other rail unions, reach out to me and say, I want to do this in my rail union. How do I get started? And my first answer is, look at your bylaws.
Right.
We have, so the District Law 19 is one member, one vote, which is democratic. Some of these rail unions have to go to a convention and they do their voting on the floor there. But so there's definitely, people are being inspired. I don't know how far it's going to go, but it's much needed. And one other thing another campaign promise here is we're going to build a coalition with other unions and negotiate. The last contract, we had a coalition, and then as soon as the PEB put out their recommendation, everyone's scattered like cockroaches. Unfortunately, the machinists were the first ones to break out of it, which doesn't look good. So there's been some work behind the scenes. I've already been talking to some other unions, and there's definitely interest. There needs to be trust, though, because what the machinists did in the last contract vote kind of burned some bridges, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, Reese, you mentioned that you had a website. Where can folks go to learn more?
That is dl19united.com. You can check us out. Everyone has a bio that's running with us. If you want to throw us a couple dollars to send out some envelopes, there's a GoFundMe going. Employers and unions cannot contribute. That's a DOL law. But yeah, check us out. And June 9th, we got a big election. And if we win, I can guarantee that the contract negotiations are going to be different in about a year and a half on the railroad.
All right, Reese, Nathaniel, thanks for talking to us, and we look forward to continuing to watch the campaign unfold.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
All right, folks. So and I don't know if this is going to be the last thing that we're going to get to, or if we're going to have some time for some other stuff. But we are going to spend some time taking a look at what happened in the Senate last week. Bernie Sanders held a hearing on Starbucks union busting. Howard Schultz was called before the committee to testify. He almost didn't, but then he was threatened with a subpoena, and so he ended up acquiescing and testifying before the committee because it seemed pretty likely that he would be subpoenaed if he didn't, and I guess he didn't want that on his record or whatever. But so the hearing was about Starbucks union busting, and it has been totally well documented. Across the country, there's really no doubt, if you are a fair person, that Starbucks has violated the law in response to the union campaign. But throughout the hearing, Schultz denied law breaking, and this first clip that we've got for you today is pretty indicative of his stance throughout the hearing.
All right, let me get these queued up here.
Do you understand that in America, workers have a fundamental right to join a union and collectively bargain to improve wages, benefits, and working conditions? Do you understand that?
I understand, and we respect the right of every partner who wears a green apron, whether they choose to join a union or not.
Are you aware that NLRB judges have ruled that Starbucks violated federal labor law over 100 times during the past 18 months, far more than any other corporation in America?
Sir, Starbucks Coffee Company unequivocally, and let me set the tone for this very early on, has not broken the law.
Okay. Are you aware that on March 1st, 2023, an administrative law judge found Starbucks guilty of, quote, egregious and widespread misconduct, end quote, widespread coercive behavior, and showed, quote, a general disregard for the employees' fundamental rights, end quote, in a union organizing campaign that started in Buffalo, New York in 2021. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware that those are allegations, and Congress has created a process that we are following, and we're confident that those allegations will be proven false.
All right, Mr. Schultz.
Wow.
They're not just allegations. They are rulings from administrative law judges. Just because he has appeals left does not mean that they are only simply allegations. They are rulings from judges with detailed evidence. I mean, you can go and read the rulings.
Right.
With citations to the evidence as to why they are violating the law. It is not just allegations. And the idea that you can get away with saying that is wild.
Yeah, to say right out the gate, we haven't broken the law?
Right.
Are you fucking kidding me? Like, really, dude? Really? We haven't broken the law.
Exactly. And Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, I believe, is where he's from. He lays it out just just how silly it is, the idea that Schultz is asking us to believe that Starbucks has not broken the law.
Right.
To square your testimony in which you insist that you rigorously follow the law. Yes. With overwhelming evidence from the organizations that are charged with enforcing American labor law that is not the case. It is akin to someone who has been ticketed for speeding 100 times, saying, I've never violated the law because every single time the cop got it wrong. That would not be a believable contention if someone was to make that before the committee. And so I find it hard to believe your insistence that notwithstanding this extraordinary set of decisions, reinstating workers, forcing stores to be reopened, that you are in fact consistently abiding by the law as your testimony is before this committee. I don't.
Yeah, and before that, Howard Schultz actually cited the case of the 7 Memphis baristas who were fired and then ordered to be reinstated as an example of how the deck is stacked against him and how actually no, we haven't violated the law and this is how. And what he doesn't tell the folks there is that the mechanism that actually forced the reinstatement of those workers was initiated by a Trump-appointed federal district court judge. A Trump appointee said that Starbucks has violated the law so egregiously that they must reinstate these baristas. And he wants you to believe that just because there are appeals left in that process has not totally played out yet, just because there are appeals left, he wants you to believe that not only in that case, where the workers were able to get a Trump appointee to side with them, not only in that case, but in every one of the hundreds of cases against Starbucks across the country, that they are not guilty.
Right.
It's absurd. It strains credulity. It's absolutely wild. And he also, throughout this, he talks about, I've got so much respect for everybody who puts on the green apron. He loves that phrase. The people who put on the green apron. He loves that phrase. And something that is indicative of the actual amount of respect that Starbucks and its corporate managers have for people who put on the green apron was on display in the hearing. Because Schultz was first to testify, and then immediately after Schultz, there was an intermission, and then after that, there was a second panel to come on after Schultz. The panel included one Starbucks worker, a former Starbucks worker who alleges that he was wrongfully fired, a expert on labor law, and then also, funny enough, former Alabama Congressperson Bradley Byrne, for representing a quote-unquote whistleblower from the National Labor Relations Board about the unfair election process that took place in Kansas at one election. The Starbucks corporate managers all left when the Starbucks workers' time to testify came up. The workers and the managers all heard Howard Schultz testify first, and then immediately after Schultz finished testifying, everybody from the company side left. Everybody from the company side left. They didn't even have enough respect for these workers to put on a face and sit through their testimony. And that is consistent. That's totally consistent with what we hear from Starbucks workers all across the country who, in the bargaining sessions that have happened, and we'll talk about this later, but in the bargaining sessions that have happened, they described being treated with contempt, not even by Starbucks management, who are largely silent at the bargaining table, but by the Littler Mendelsohn attorneys that they have hired. being treated with contempt, and Starbucks workers report that you can tell on their faces that they hate having to even be in the room with a working person, much less having to sit on the other side of a table from them as an ostensible equal. That's the kind, and they displayed that. They displayed that level of contempt at the hearing last week. It's just totally disgusting. And in this hearing that Howard Schultz testified at, Howard Schultz, former Democratic candidate for president, right? That he was able to become a candidate for president just because he was a billionaire. I mean, think about that. I have money, so I'm qualified to be president of the United States.
And let us not forget,
that
2016 candidate Hillary Clinton
wanted him to be her Secretary of Labor. That's always great to include when we talk about Howard Schultz. His only friends in that hearing were Republicans. And this goes to, we talked, we didn't plan this, but there has been a bit of a through line during the episode today of how, quote unquote wokeness or a liberal veneer is used cynically by corporations to obscure over their interest in lording over their employees, in abusing their employees in many ways. And I think that we can see this from Starbucks, because up until the workers started to unionize, there was this idea of Starbucks as kind of a model employer, even among the Democrats. And it's become more and more clear as the story, as workers continue to unionize, that it was just a veneer over any other company.
Right. Yeah, because they had this like pseudo progressive image, and it was very shallow, but it was out there, and it also had opposition from the far right.
Right.
Because I can't speak to everywhere, but certainly down here in Alabama, we had plenty of folks who thought and still think Starbucks is anti-Christian.
Mm-hmm.
They're anti-Christian.
Right.
Probably because of a cup having to do with Christmas, I think.
Yeah.
You don't get too many sophisticated answers when you pry for something like that. But yeah, there's some fascination, I think, with Starbucks and being too woke, too progressive, whatever it may be. And so it's funny to see that Republican senators are coming to his defense when their own base doesn't like Starbucks, or at least a significant amount of the base. Now,
it really is amazing that they just can't help themselves. Like, this it really is. The base has been activated against Starbucks in many ways throughout the years,
right?
Because of whatever design.
Weren't they? I think that was a very important front in the war on Christmas.
Right.
That theater saw a lot of action.
And the idea that the Republican senators could not help themselves but be on the side of a corporation, despite all of this, the anti-Starbucks animus that's been circling around on right-wing radio. It's just really kind of fascinating.
Right.
It's wild.
Well, their class allegiance comes out when push comes to shove. They love to spew a lot of bullshit in their media apparatus that they feed to, the normal folks, right? The regular viewers. Get mad at Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
They hate Jesus.
Right.
And then turn around and defend their billionaire, union-busting, law-breaking asshole CEO.
Right. And so, Rand Paul's response, Rand Paul's kind of opening statement for the minority in the Senate was pretty emblematic of, a lot of what we saw from the Republicans. So let's play this first clip from Rand Paul to see what they had to say.
I kind of don't want to, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Ayn Rand's Howard Roark points out the ingratitude that man has for the entrepreneur, the creator. Thousands of years ago, the first man discovered how to make fire. He was probably burnt at the stake he taught the others to light.
Mm. I mean, just listen to that. Listen to that. The aggrievement, the persecution complex there. I mean, it's just totally wild. And then he goes on to say, like, oh, Starbucks didn't invent fire, but they did, they're admirable, blah, 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 blah.
I wish he could have just come up there and said, haters are going to hate, and Howard Schultz has a lot of haters, so I'm going to support him.
Yeah.
He could have said that, and honestly, that would have made more sense than the not. I'm not surprised he would quote her in his hearing in his very first fucking paragraph. Not surprised.
His first 2 words was Ayn Rand. Wild. And then let's play the second clip from Rand Paul about why he thinks that Starbucks is being attacked right now.
Convincing the public to buy very expensive coffee is not the discovery of fire, but still it deserves respect. Instead, Congress convenes today not to praise Starbucks, but to bury them. The hearing today is convened to attack a private company for its success, when its success has benefited both customers and its employees alike. We've heard of the average wages, over $17. We've heard of the 401k plans. We've heard of the parental leave, even for part-time employees. Starbucks giving away tens of millions of dollars each year. They have 100% tuition and fee for a bachelor's degree. Maybe it doesn't sound like too bad a place to work.
Yeah, well, you know what, Rand? If it's not so bad a place to work, then why don't you go work there?
Right? Isn't that's what we're supposed to say, right?
Right.
Oh, you don't like your job? Go get another job.
Yeah. Well, if you like that job, maybe you should take it.
Right.
Maybe you should take it. But also, here's a question, Adam. Was the hearing titled "The Poverty Wages of Starbucks"? An expose. Is that what the title of the hearing was?
I don't think it was.
Was it about Starbucks doesn't offer any health care at all? Was that the title of the hearing?
No, I don't think so.
Let's hear. Okay, well, now I'm a bit confused. I'm a bit confused. Was the title of the hearing "Why Success is Always Bad"?
Close.
Yeah, so
you're getting closer there, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna need my memory jogged. Let's go to Bernie Sanders, where he tells in response to Mark Wayne Mullen, who went on a really bizarre tirade against Bernie Sanders in his book writing.
Yeah, well, he's still kind of grieving over getting his ass whipped by the Teamsters in that hearing.
Yeah, but in response to that, Bernie, as always on message, he reminded people what the hearing is about.
Furthermore, what this hearing is about is whether or not you talk about being pro-union. Really, what this hearing is about is whether workers have the constitutional right to form a union. The evidence is overwhelming, not from me, but from the National Labor Relations Board, is that time after time after time, despite what Mr. Schultz is saying, Starbucks has broken the law and has prevented workers from joining unions to collectively bargain for decent wages and benefits. Senator Baldwin.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Rand Paul must have not gotten the memo that is evident from the title of the hearing. He must not have realized that, in fact, the hearing was not about what are the particulars of the benefits package that's offered at Starbucks. It was about whether or not workers in this country have the constitutional right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of association in the workplace. That's what it was about. It wasn't about how much money Howard Schultz has. It wasn't about this or that or the other thing. Those are ancillary things that can be brought up related to that, potentially, if it's relevant. But the fundamental thing is Starbucks violating the law? And how are they violating the law? And the answer is obviously yes. And how they violated the law is evident throughout the hearing.
I mean, we're talking over 1,000 violations of the law. 1,000. Over 1,000. And what, in 1 year's time, maybe? Maybe, you know, it's really egregious. And, you know, last I checked, Mr. Rand Paul liked to talk about freedom. Love to talk about freedom.
Right.
Is this not an issue of freedom? The ability to organize with your coworkers, your speech, your assembly. I mean, if ever there was something about freedom to discuss here, Mr. Paul, here's your opportunity. But time after time, just as Starbucks violates the law, Republicans show whose side they're on.
Right. Exactly. And that's how you know that the company's side has no argument. It's all built on sand because they never address the argument. They never look and see, okay, let's look at this case.
Right.
Did or did
they
not...
They haven't come up with over 1,000 explanations.
Exactly.
For these violations.
And so they always try to obfuscate, and they always say, oh, you're being attacked for your success. Oh, woe is me. I'm a billionaire. People hate me. Oh, woe is me. And I'm not going to be a part of a witch hunt. Explain to us how it's a witch hunt, Rand. Explain that to us. If it's a witch hunt, you should have no problem at all disentangling all of the ways in which all 1,000 of the allegations against Starbucks are bullshit.
Right.
Just prove it to us.
Yeah, and it really pisses me off to hear that kind of language, you know, witch hunt. Okay, well, first of all, do you know what they did to the witches?
Right.
It was a little bit worse than testifying before Congress, because here's the thing. What Howard Schultz endured this week is probably the biggest consequence the man will ever face for any of this.
Exactly.
That is how weak the labor law is in this country, that is probably the extent to it. And, you know, I get that Senator Sanders is actually using his capacity as chairman of the Help Committee to do something, to try to be proactive and actually respond to the issues of people in this country. And so I appreciate Senator Sanders for what he's doing. And I guess it's blowing some people's minds that they might actually back up labor law in Congress. You know, there's a never-ending stream to be tough on crime.
Right.
These same motherfuckers talking like this in the hearing would love for you to be tough on crime.
Right.
But it's only some kind of crime. It's only some kind of criminals, right? Yeah. So it's not a witch hunt. Congress has had hearings that were witch hunts. We've had the Red Scare, and it helped devastate the labor movement in this country, and we still have not recovered from that. We are still suffering from that witch hunt. This guy is a billionaire lawbreaker, rampant violations of the law time after time. And the worst thing that happens to him is he has to sit there and testify under oath, which obviously made no difference to him because he still fucking lied.
Right.
And that was the worst thing that's going to happen to him over this. He's not going to lose his billions. He's not going to ever face a day in jail. He's never going to lose his freedom. He's never going to suffer consequences, real consequences like the workers in Starbucks have had to face as a result of his bullshit.
Exactly. And, you know, another one of the ways that they try to obfuscate and try to deploy a defense for Starbucks, and Romney is the one who deployed this one, to insulate these companies from criticism, they'll say that you can't criticize unless you're a job creator. Let's listen to that.
Oh, God.
I recognize at the outset there's some irony to a non-coffee drinking Mormon conservative defending a Democrat candidate for president in perhaps one of the most liberal companies in America. That being said, I also think it's somewhat rich that that you're being grilled by people who have never had the opportunity to create a single job, and yet they believe that they know better how to do so, and what's best for the American worker, and what's best for the American economy, what's best for growth.
the idea that, I mean, this also showcases the elitism of the fact that he's defending this guy at all really showcases the elitism of some of these Republican politicians that they can't help themselves. We talked about that. They can't help themselves but come to the defense of a quote-unquote liberal company because it's a company. Well, another way that they showcase their elitism is that they want to silo off from criticism job creators, bosses, executives, companies. They want to silo off from criticism those companies from anybody that is not one of their own. If you're not in this big club, then your complaints or concerns or your voice doesn't matter because you're not a job creator. You're not a job creator. You don't have millions or billions of dollars in the bank. So what you have to say just doesn't matter, little guy. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Because there are workers there. Half of that room was filled up with Starbucks workers. And he was trying to direct it at Sanders, right? That's who he's trying to direct it at. But Sanders isn't the one levying the criticism. Sanders is, in some ways, an amplification of the criticism, but the criticism is coming from the workers. He didn't pull this out of his ass, right? This came from the workers. He's telling these workers who are in that hearing and all across the country at Starbucks stores and at any other place, if you work for a living, you got to shut your damn mouth because you don't know anything. You got to listen to your betters, listen to people like me who have $1 million and shut your damn mouth. That's what he's telling you. That's what he's telling you. And I also wanted to, the idea, job creator is of course a myth. It's of course a myth because consumers are the ones that create jobs. They can't create a job out of nothing. There has to be something there that created the wealth for the job to be paid for, and that something is consumption and labor, right? And so it's a myth on that ground, but also there's some more deconstruction to do about that term. And I was listening to the Majority Report last week, and Emma Vigeland did a really good job pulling out some stuff from Mitt Romney's past that maybe complicates his perception of himself as a quote-unquote job creator. It's a little bit of a long clip, but I think it's worth it. Let's play that.
They're not job creators. They're job gatekeepers. And oftentimes, in Mitt Romney's case in particular as well, they're job killers. Old article from 2011 by Michael Barbaro from the New York Times, now the Daily guy, wrote about Mitt Romney in the midst of his presidential campaign. By the green-hued yardsticks of Wall Street, the 1990s buyout of an Illinois medical company by Mitt Romney's private equity firm was a spectacular success. Mr. Romney's company, Bain Capital, sent a team of 10 turnaround experts from Boston to ferret out waste, motivate executives, and study untapped markets. By the time the Harvard MBAs from Bain were finished, sales at the medical company Dade International had more than doubled. The business acquired 2 of its rivals, and Mr. Romney's firm collected $242 million, a return 8 times its investment. Whoa, that's a lot of job creation, right? But an examination of the Dade deal, which Mr. Romney approved and presided over, shows the unintended human costs, Barbaro, let's not unintended, human costs and messy financial consequences behind the brand of capitalism that he practiced for 15 years. At Bain Capital's direction, Dade quadrupled the money it owed creditors and vendors. It took steps that propelled the business towards bankruptcy. And in waves of layoffs, it cut loose 1,700 workers in the United States, including Brian and Kristen Shoemaker, who lost their jobs at the plant in Westwood, Massachusetts. Staggered, Mr. Shoemaker wondered, how could the bean counters just come in here and say, hey, it's over? They interview some of the workers that lost their jobs. Bain and a small group of investors bought Dade in 1994 with mostly borrowed money, limiting their risk. They extracted cash from the company at almost every turn, paying themselves nearly $100 million in fees, first for buying the company and then for helping to run it. Later, just after Mr. Romney stepped down from his role, Bain took $242 million out of the business in a transaction that, according to bankruptcy documents and several former Dade officials, weakened the company. Even some people who benefited from the payday and found it reasonable at the time now question it. Essentially, they pushed the company into that bankruptcy. On the campaign trail, Mitt Romney has taken a tough love approach to the economy, suggesting that the best remedy for the housing market was to allow foreclosures to hit the bottom. It was the same approach he took with Bain, as he explained in an interview to the New York Times in 2007 when asked about layoffs at the companies that he bought. "Sometimes the medicine is a little bitter," he said, "but it is necessary to save the life of a patient." The patient being Bain and all the hundreds of millions of dollars that they're making from this. And it goes on and on. I mean, Bain ended up helping this company, Dade, acquire a company called DuPont, part of a division in DuPont, a diagnostics division in 1996, and another medical testing company. For DuPont, they had a plant in Puerto Rico after Dade, under the direction of Bain Capital, acquired DuPont. It closed its plant in Puerto Rico. All but a few of its nearly 300 workers were laid off. Arsenio Munez Rosado, a 51-year-old father who has spent 23 years at the plant, started out as a groundskeeper, sank into a debilitating depression. Still jobless 6 months after he was let go, he tried to commit suicide with a full bottle of Xanax pills. It was the first of several attempts. Job creators.
Yeah. So, maybe you in the audience have never created a job, but you've probably also not cost 2,000 people their jobs.
Right.
And you've probably not gotten $100 million to do that. I mean, just the idea, just the hubris of that statement. Having that, I don't know, maybe he doesn't have that in the back of his head. But having done that, and then being able to call yourself a job creator. A job creator. It's just insane. Absolutely insane. But that's not the end of Romney making a fool of himself. And I talked about Democratic politicians not knowing labor law, and Republican politicians don't know labor law either, because Romney accidentally praised Starbucks for violating labor law. Let's listen to this.
First, would note that within your company, there are probably some stores that are union, some that are non-union. Do the non-union store employees get paid less than the union store employees?
The starting wage has been the same. The only difference is the benefits that we created in May. And my understanding under the law is that we were not allowed to provide those benefits to people who are organizing to join a union.
And so, in fact, that non-union stores are actually a little better total package than the union stores.
Whoops! Whoopsie daisy!
Yep. What he said, by the way, which he repeated over and over and over again during the hearing, is so blatantly untrue. I'm not an attorney, but I knew right away when they announced that they were providing benefits for some stores, but not for others, and it was based on the union status. That's bullshit. 100%, there is no legal justification for it. By the way, Starbucks Workers United already put it in writing that they have no objections to, credit card tipping and these other benefits being rolled out in every store, including the stores that they currently represent.
Yes.
So there's no justification.
Yeah, well, thank goodness Tina Smith pushed him on this, because Senator Tina Smith from, where is she from?
Montana? I don't know.
I don't know, but she pushed him on this, and I'm so thankful for that, because I seriously thought we were going to get through the whole hearing without anybody pushing him on that, because he kept saying it, and he just kept saying it and kept saying it. Oh, it's illegal for us, and he kept saying it. And I was like,
anyone who knew anything about labor law knew that was so untrue.
Exactly. I was seriously worried that we were going to get through the whole hearing and nobody was going to push him on that, but she did. And so let's listen to this, where she pushes him into maybe admitting a little something that maybe he didn't mean to.
Is still. Mr. Schultz, you repeatedly call your employees partners. Do you value your employees or your partners that want to join a union or have joined a union? Do you value them as much as you value those that have not yet joined a union?
We have respect for every single partner who wears a green apron, regardless of their choice to go for a union.
So yesterday I had the opportunity to meet with some unionized Starbucks workers from Minnesota, Gracie and Elizabeth, and they tell me that Starbucks is cutting their weekly hours. They estimate that they're losing $4 an hour in wages because the company won't allow them in unionized stores to access credit card tipping when that's available to workers in non-unionized shops. And they tell me that they are simultaneously understaffed in their stores and unable to get enough hours to pay their bills. If these folks are your partners, why are you treating them differently than the non-unionized workers?
When we raised wages in May, my understanding was that under the law, we did not have the unilateral right to provide those benefits to partners who were involved in collective bargaining. And that is why.
So you have said that several times during this meeting. You've said that you cannot legally provide these benefits without bargaining over them, but you know, I'm sure, that the union has specifically stated in this letter, July 15th, 2022, that they waived any objection to bargaining on this. It says in the letter, to this end, the union hereby waives any objection that we might have to Starbucks providing union-represented employees with any wage or benefit improvements provided to unrepresented employees. So I don't think this, I just think you're wrong.
Oh, let me try and explain. There are an array of wages and benefits that need to be negotiated in the collective bargaining process. It would not be proper to take one piece of the puzzle out of the negotiating process, since the people who have joined the union have decided that they want to negotiate a contract. It is our preference and our right to negotiate that contract fairly and objectively, but not in piecemeal.
Yep. So I think that the way the law reads is that there is an exception to that requirement to negotiate when the employees make a clear and unmistakable waiver to bargaining. But let me ask.
Exactly.
And he said it there. He said it is our preference, and he says his right, and that's not the case, but it is our preference to negotiate the contract in whole and not piecemeal.
Yeah.
I think he ought to be whatever the discipline is for lying to Congress. He ought to face that.
Right.
Because clearly
you're not supposed to lie under oath.
Right.
And that's supposed to be the rule.
That is clearly what happened there, and he was clearly aware of it because Senator Smith was able to push him into admitting that, I know that I was saying that I thought it was illegal before, but now, okay, you pushed me, so really it's actually just a preference that I got. It's a preference that I have. It's a preference to not give these workers the same benefits that all of the other employees have at my stores. It's a preference.
I mean, it also just boggles common sense, right? Like, common sense dictates, okay, you've got these people who are organizing, who want to make things better on their job. They are not going to turn down the new benefits that are being offered. They're going to, the smart ones are going to realize the only reason they're offering this shit in the first place is because we've been organizing.
Right.
Because we've been unionizing. And so now they're trying to sweeten the deal a little bit. They're trying to buy people off a little bit. Of course we'll take your extra money. Of course we'll take the extra benefits.
And actually just a couple of days before the hearing, the NLRB came out with a ruling saying that not only Is it, hey, actually, you know what? It's legal. It would be legal if you gave these employees credit card tipping as they have waived their right to negotiate over the same benefit that you're giving to all the non-union stores. It would be legal if you did that. Not only are they saying that, 2 days before this hearing, they said that the withholding of that benefit was illegal. The NLRB, in a ruling issued on March the 27th, said that Starbucks illegally withheld a major benefit, the credit card tipping. And now the NLRB is ordering that they give back pay to the nearly 7,000 workers that it's been withheld from. And so we'll see how much back pay that is. But if you start talking about 7,000 workers, $4 an hour, and these people are working 20, 30 hours a week, you can easily start, you're looking at millions of dollars potentially. And so, I hope that they, get them for all they're worth there. But the idea that after that ruling comes out, you're still saying, not only are you saying, because through the, I listened closely to this hearing, and he said, both we thought at the time that it was illegal, which is almost half defensible. If you want to be stupid, you can pretend to believe that, and people will maybe buy it.
Right. Never mind the essentially unlimited budget for lawyers.
Right.
And the fact that they have retained some of the highest priced lawyers in the game.
Right.
But yeah, I guess you could try to believe that at one point in time they received bad advice.
Yes. But after the union waived their right to that, and then after the NLRB ruled that withholding that benefit was illegal, the idea that you could still say, because he maintained it in the present tense. He said that I believe, present tense, that it is not legal for us to do that. It's not believable. It is not believable that that's actually what he thought in his head. Well, he should be arrested for perjury, for lying to Congress, whatever that is, and sent to prison for that. Because that was a clear, obvious lie. Clearly, obviously lying under oath there, Howard Schultz. Just unbelievable. And so let's look at this. Additionally, part of this issue is not only are they not giving these benefits to them piecemeal, but they're not coming to first contracts. They're not coming to first contracts.
Right. They're acting in bad faith, 100%.
Right. And so and we're going to skip the virtual shareholders one and go to the single store clip, and then we're going to go back to the virtual shareholders one. But he explains why it's been so hard for him to schedule meetings to negotiate on these first contracts, which is what he lays the blame at the workers for the reason that they've not got a first contract yet. Let's listen to this.
Under your leadership, Starbucks has repeatedly refused to bargain with any of the 7,000 workers in nearly 300 stores where workers have voted to represent themselves through a union. The first group of workers to win their election have been waiting more than 460 days to reach a first contract. Mr. Schultz, will you commit right now that within 14 days of this hearing, Starbucks will exchange proposals with the union, something it has refused to do for more than 450 days, so that meaningful progress can be made to bargain a first contract in good faith? Will you make that commitment?
Because the arrangement that was made by the union and the NLRB in Buffalo to negotiate one single store at a time, we have met over 85 times for a single store. We've tried to arrange over 350 separate meetings. We've said publicly, and I say it here again, that we believe that face-to-face negotiations is the way to proceed. And the reason I want to make that point is that there have been safety issues in which Starbucks managers have been outed on social media. There are privacy issues. We don't want to do it on Zoom. We are prepared to meet face-to-face on a single store issue.
Will you make a promise to this committee that you will exchange proposals with the union so that we can begin to make meaningful progress?
On a single store basis, we will continue to negotiate in good faith. That's what we'll do.
2 minutes over.
You haven't given proposals in over 450 days, and you're going to say that you're still acting in good faith?
Yeah.
Jesus.
It's just insane. And the idea that you have to have a face-to-face meeting is just silly. And, you know, the idea that, oh, they've been outed on social media. Well, you know, maybe don't.
It's called LinkedIn.
Right.
Anyone can go there and find out where you work, dipshit.
Exactly.
If you're embarrassed to be in management, if you're embarrassed to be a union buster, if you're embarrassed to go into a bargaining room and act in bad faith towards workers,
maybe don't do that.
Go find another job, right?
Yeah.
That's what you tell the baristas. You don't like it here, go find another job. Why don't you find another fucking job?
Exactly. And you are not, under the National Labor Relations Act, you are not entitled, the employer is not, to whatever ground rules you want. You can't do that. And so you cannot not negotiate because the workers want the negotiations to be more open. And the reason that the workers want them to be more open is, the reason that the employers don't want them to be open, the reason that Starbucks want these things to be hidden, to happen behind closed doors, is because they don't want the rest of their employees to figure out what they actually think about them. That's the issue there, right? Because if they are negotiating in good faith and the workers are the ones being unreasonable, well, why would you be worried about other people seeing that? What would be the issue? And it's also important to note as a point of fact, the agreement that he mentions about negotiating store by store is fictional. That was not the agreement that was reached. The arrangement that was reached by the NLRB and the workers was to have elections store by store. They were actually interested in larger regional or national negotiations, but Starbucks is refusing to do that. Starbucks is the one that is necessitating single store by store negotiations, not the workers. So that's an important thing to mention. And he talks about the importance of face-to-face communication. And later on in the thing, he talks about how, it's just the best. It's better to talk face-to-face. And I'm sympathetic to that. That, I like face-to-face communication. But it's not it's not an excuse to not bargain with your employees. But Senator Ben Ray Lujan from New Mexico, I believe, he threw a kink in that story about how, face-to-face communication is so important. Let's play this and see what their stance is with respect to shareholder meetings.
Is it true that Starbucks can hold shareholder meetings virtually, but it refuses to allow some union members to join bargaining negotiations virtually, even if other members are present?
That's correct.
There you go. Shareholders can meet via Zoom, but not workers. There you go. So, I mentioned throughout that, this is that a lot of this is just aggrievement, right? It's just aggrievement. And so I wanted to pull out some of the worst stuff about how, just how aggrieved these people are pretending to be. And so here we have Howard Schultz making the case that billionaire is a slur. Let's hear that. See how compelling it is.
This moniker billionaire, let's just get at that, okay? I grew up in federally subsidized housing. Let me finish. I grew up in federally subsidized housing. My parents never owned a home. I came from nothing. I thought my entire life was based on the achievement of the American dream. Yes, I have billions of dollars. I earned it. No one gave it to me. And I've shared it constantly with the people of Starbucks. And so anyone who keeps labeling this billionaire thing, it's
Mr. Schultz, I don't mean to cut you off. We have time limits here, and you have the opportunity. I'm not cutting you off.
It's your moniker constantly. It's unfair.
No, it is not. You have had more time. I've been generous with the time. I'm sorry.
But, Mr. Chairman.
We have a room full of people. Yeah. We have a panel to go after you.
Fine,
You're not the only person testifying.
Okay.
Senator Cassidy.
Billionaire is a slur, according to Howard Schultz. Wow.
And he earned his. I mean, the thing is like, this moniker billionaire. Well, if you earned it, then you should be proud of it. Right. And he talks about nobody gave it to. I mean, the idea that he was able to say with a straight face, "I earned it. No one gave it to me." immediately after talking about how he grew up in federally subsidized housing.
Right.
Like the idea that you don't see that. Like, on one hand, I understand how people can think it's cool that somebody can grow up from federally subsidized housing to be a person of import, right? Be nicer. It would be even cooler if he wasn't such a piece of shit, right?
Yeah.
But, that's a story there.
It's an accomplishment.
But you didn't get there on your own by virtue of the fact that you lived in subsidized housing, but that the government subsidized. Society paid for you to have a roof over your head. I mean, society, in more ways than for the average person, right? I mean, for just the average person, just anybody who's never had any quote unquote welfare or whatever, even those people, they don't have a claim to earning, quote unquote, everything that they make, because we're all products of our surroundings. And our surroundings are created by society.
Right.
Our schools are built by society. Our schools, our teachers teach our students that we didn't, that we don't pay for them. Everybody pays for them. Everybody pays for the roads that we have. Everybody pays for Social Security, for Medicare. Everybody pays for all, everybody pays in, everybody takes out a little bit, right? But he had even more than that as somebody who came up with federally subsidized housing, which is great. And I support that. But the idea that you can come away and say, in the same breath as you mention that, nobody gave it to me. Nobody gave it to me. I earned it. I earned it. I mean, hubris, the aggrievement, it's really.
Yeah, I mean, makes you wonder who went out and harvested all those coffee beans.
Yeah, it does make you wonder that.
Who produced the coffee? Who actually made the drinks? Who served the drinks? Howard must have been really busy since he earned it all by himself.
Right.
He must be in a lot of places.
This woman from the Heritage Foundation also took part in the Aggrievement Fest. Let's
well, they're good for that, aren't they?
Yeah, let's listen to what she had to say.
Instead of adapting to provide new services that workers value, unions have turned to political force and inciting animosity. Depicting company management as 12-foot diseased rats is dehumanizing and destructive.
Boo fucking who. You know what else is dehumanizing and destructive? Management.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, maybe most workers in this world.
Yeah, maybe don't be dehumanizing and destructive, and we won't call you dehumanizing and destructive. There's an idea.
If the label fits, right?
If the shoe fits, then there you go.
If you don't want to have Scabby the rat in front of your place of business, don't do the kind of shit that attracts Scabby the rat to your business.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Consequences.
Right.
Sorry, you don't like consequences? I thought we were all supposed to be responsible for our own choices.
There you go. Another thing that they were complaining about is the fact that somebody salted their business, and he was talking about Jazz Brizak, who is who did salt Starbucks, and that's a good and cool thing. She previously worked for SEIU. She went to, organizing schools there. And she's a Rhodes Scholar. And instead of becoming a McKinseyite ghoul working for, corporations like Starbucks and trying to figure out how they can squeeze the most profit from the most amount of people and cut jobs and all of this and funnel more wealth to the top, she decided with her learning that she was going to try to help working people, which is cool as shit. But that is not the opinion that Howard Schultz has of her.
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman. Can I come back and just address something you said, if you don't mind? You talked about Buffalo. I just want to clarify. From what I understand, the activities in Buffalo began in August of 21. I was not the CEO at the time. I came back in April of 22. But I want to share with the committee what we have found out about the organizing in Buffalo. And I think this is important for everyone to know. The organizing in Buffalo began with an individual who we later found out was paid for and joined Starbucks as an employee in 2020. And even though we hired her on her own merit, we found out that she was paid for by the very union trying to organize Starbucks.
I'm going to have to cut you off. Senator.
That was a good story. We'll come back to that because it sounds like something to do.
I hope you do.
I'll defer to Senator Mark Wayne Muller.
Well, thank you. And considering the chairman doesn't want to hear any of that information because I believe he's pretty biased in his opinion already, Mr. Schultz, I'll give you an opportunity to finish that if you'll do it quickly.
Thank you very much. So, as you might imagine, we're very curious to understand what happened in Buffalo. And we later found out that this individual, which was hired in 2020, was paid for and under the employment of the union that was basically trying to organize Starbucks. We later found out there was more than one person. And so you might want to ask yourself, where's the fairness, the objectivity, and the integrity of what we're talking about here today?
No, and I mean...
Yeah, that's super sad, super sad. Let's hear, he talks about her again in the hearing, going even a little bit further. Let's play this clip.
Any comments upon this person getting paid by the union when she came to your store in an attempt to organize it?
Well, if that's not a nefarious act, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it does seem just a little bit inorganic.
Yeah.
Nefarious. Nefarious. And he's saying the reason it's nefarious is because she was paid by somebody that was not the Starbucks workers to come and organize them and to explain to them, you know, to organize with them, to help them fight for their rights, for better wages, better working conditions, to have a voice themselves. He thinks that's nefarious because she was paid to do that in part or at one time. And yet Starbucks is paying literally millions of dollars to Littler Mendelsohn attorneys.
Right. What's good for me is not good for thee.
Right. I mean, the idea that you can try to third-party the union in this way while bringing in an actual literal third party and paying them significantly more than the union.
It's such a false equivalence of resources. Okay, you know, if there was one or two people went into Starbucks getting a job there with the explicit aim of unionizing, and if they had some resources and support from a union, well, good.
Right.
I'm glad to hear that, because it still doesn't get anywhere close to the level of disparity between resources. Because, as you said, you're talking about hiring some of the most nefarious, to use their word, nefarious law firms in the country, and blowing money left and right to try to keep these people out. So
yeah, and the thing that I forgot to pull...
It's a historic practice. Mm-hmm. It's always been done. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing nefarious about it. And certainly the companies have no qualms about doing their own kind of thing.
Yeah, and I pulled the clip, but I forgot to put it in the OBS. But Bob Casey kind of grills him on his use of millions of dollars to union bust, and how that actually us as taxpayers are subsidizing that, because it is legal to write off attorney's fees for union busting law firms for union avoidance as just a regular business cost, in the same way that you would wages or capital investment, you know, buying a new coffee machine. You can write that off on your taxes. Well, you can also write off union busting. And so in a way, you and I are paying these Littler Mendelsohn attorneys. But Jazz Brizak is nefarious. Yeah. Give me a fucking break. So we've got this last thing from the hearing, and then we're going to wrap up. Howard Schultz tries to make the case why unionization is actually is actually really bad and people shouldn't do it. Here's part of that case.
21 Starbucks people, partners, work in that store. How many people do you think voted to either become a union or not a union? Take a guess.
Got me. I would presume the
Well, I
majority.
think when you hear the number, you'll understand the problem. 21 people in the store, 6 people voted. 6. 4 voted to become a union and 2 voted for not. Now, I'm not saying why the other people didn't vote. That's up to the committee to decide. But you can imagine there's issues going on in a store like that where people work close together and influence people to do one thing versus the other. But here's the problem. Since 6 people voted to the union, of the 7 stores in Vermont, this particular store has twice the level of attrition, and the majority of the people have left the store. And the tension that exists in any store that Starbucks has, since it's individual stores voting in a small group of people, there is lots of issues that we are dealing with, and overall, in the stores that have voted for union, about 300 are twice the level of attrition that we currently have in the 99% of stores that have not voted for union. But the Vermont thing is not a proxy. The Vermont thing is exactly what's going on around the country.
Yeah. There you go. So, oh, well, if you unionize, look, it just, by magic, it makes the thing more tense. And also the implication that, the implication there that, oh, well, these people probably didn't vote because of the intimidation from the other workers. That was obviously the implication, but it's only an implication, and there's not any evidence or fact behind that implication because there isn't any, because obviously there almost certainly wasn't any intimidation, and the intimidation that a fellow worker could give somebody is so much less than you would get from the company. I mean, the idea, again, this false equivalency, the idea that they're even remotely equal, that it is worth considering them in the same thought is absurd. It's absurd. And then Maggie Carter from Knoxville, from the Starbucks store that organized the first union in the South, she talks about a little bit about why that attrition rate might be higher at the newly unionized locations.
Just 5 days after announcing our union drive, our regional director drove to our store from out of state and was working alongside my partners, attempting to make drinks. It's the first time in my entire time with the company that I've met a regional director in person. Partners suddenly started getting disciplined for minor dress code violations or being 5 or so minutes late. Every day, it felt as if there was a concerted effort to build a case against partners who showed even the smallest bit of support for the union. Days prior to ballots being mailed out for the election, managers closed our store for hour-long periods, most during peak operating times, to hold impromptu captive audience meetings. It felt like the company was suddenly paying full attention to us and were willing to throw absolutely anything at us to deter us from organizing.
And there you go. This tension doesn't just magically appear. It is inflicted on the workers by the boss. And yes, sometimes workers will just want out. They just want it to end. And so they'll leave and they'll try to find a job somewhere else. But that is not because of the workers. It's because of the boss. And the fact that the attrition rate at union stores is higher, if that's the case, which I don't necessarily doubt, that fact makes it all the more evident that the rest of the stores need to unionize.
Right. Because at any point, Starbucks can take away a lot of the tension here by actually operating in good faith. Reach first contracts with the stores that have unionized. Call off your dogs and your union-busting attorneys. Call off the union-busting campaign and just voluntarily recognize unions as they are organized by these workers. If you did that, wow, I imagine there's going to be less tension.
Right. Exactly.
It's just a thought. I mean, obviously they have no intention of doing so, considering their behavior in this hearing. But I can't not be frustrated by that. I mean, at any given point, Starbucks can change the direction of this. They can change the tension and reduce the tension, the antagonism. They could play a big role there, and I've got a feeling it would go over well. In fact, they would probably get a lot better PR than what they've had the last week. And they might even get business from union-minded folks.
Right.
So if they had any interest whatsoever in doing the right thing, and it wouldn't even have to be for the right thing. It really could just be to boost their image or to boost their sales. And hell, it probably would work.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how committed they are to busting worker power.
Yeah, exactly. And with that, I think that's going to wrap up our coverage of the hearing, and that's going to wrap up Overtime, folks. I appreciate everybody hanging out with us. We went a little bit long, but I think hopefully it was worth it. Make sure that you tune in for Shop Talk Thursday morning, and come back and tune in again next week. We're going to be playing an interview from the local musicians union. I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. So appreciate y'all hanging out with us, folks. Until next week, all power to the workers.